like to call to order the regular formal meeting of the Iowa City City Council for October the 1st, 2019. Roll call, please.
Holt.
Here.
Mims.
Here.
Silly. Here. Taylor.
Here.
Teague.
Here.
Thomas.
Here.
Throgmorton.
Here. So good evening, everybody. I don't know about you, but we were sitting here in our work session about a half an hour ago or 45 minutes ago, and suddenly we heard all this wind out here. It sounded pretty strong, but you all managed to get here somehow, so that's good. Hope no trees were torn down and that kind of thing. Okay, we have several proclamations to read tonight, so in order to save my voice and save you the difficulty of listening to me read 6 proclamations, I'm going to ask Mayor Pro Tem Pauline Taylor to read 3 of them, and I'll read the other 3. She's going to read the first one, and then I'll read the second, her the third, and so on. So the first is Domestic Violence Awareness. Pauline?
Okay. City of Iowa City Proclamation. Whereas domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking affects women, children, and men of all racial, cultural, and economic backgrounds, causing long-term physical, psychological, and emotional harm. And whereas 1 in 3 Americans have witnessed an incident of domestic violence, and whereas children who experience domestic violence are at a higher risk for failure in school, mental illness, substance abuse, suicide, and may choose violence as a way to solve problems later in life. And whereas domestic violence in rural communities exists as a hidden, silent, and often unrecognized crime that is often underreported, and whereas through the inspiration, courage, and persistence of victims of domestic violence, their children, and advocates, our communities are learning to recognize the impact of violence in the home and intimate relationships. And whereas the Domestic Violence Intervention Program has worked to end violence in intimate relationships for more than 40 years through the collaborative partnerships of advocates, volunteers, local municipalities, criminal justice, health and human services, faith communities, business leaders, and private citizens. And whereas our community's achievements should be commended, and we must continue our commitment to respect and support victims of domestic violence and to prevent future violence in our community. Now, therefore, James A. Throgmorton, Mayor of Iowa City, does hereby proclaim the month of October 2019 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in Iowa City, Iowa, and urge all citizens to work together to eliminate domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking from our community. Is someone here in the audience to accept the proclamation? I have Elias or Andy. And you're welcome then to say a few words.
Yeah, I know. I feel like I almost had a nice moment with all of you guys. Well, Iowa City Council members, the public, thank you very much for having me up here. My name is Elias. I'm the Director of Shelter and Youth Services for DVIP. And like I said, our work, as difficult as it is, and the families, individuals that we serve, one thing that I know is that we wouldn't be able to do this work in supporting victims of domestic violence, whether human trafficking, whether it is sexual assault, whether it is some form of violence. We wouldn't be able to do the things that we can do without the community support. So we really appreciate the recognition. We really appreciate that this community takes the resources to go ahead and support victims, and most importantly, believing their situation and their story. And I think this is the big reason why these proclamations are very important to us, is that victims get to be heard on many different levels. But like I said, that's why we are very excited to always be up here, and we're always appreciative of our community support, whether the diapers that we receive for our Shop for Shelter, which will be happening this Saturday, whether it is a child who during the holidays will receive a new toy, whether it is a pacifier. All these things come into play from the community support to help families who have experienced violence have some normalcy in their lives. So thank you very much, and thank you for your support.
Okay, our next proclamation has to do with Fire Prevention Week. Whereas the City of Iowa City is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting Iowa City, and whereas fire is a serious public safety concern, both locally and nationally, and homes are the locations where people are at greatest risk from fire, and whereas home fires killed 3,400 people in the United States in 2017, according to the National Fire Protection Association, and fire departments in the United States responded to 357,000 home fires. And whereas working smoke alarms cut the risk of dying in reported home fires in half, and 3 out of 5 home fire deaths result from fires in properties without working smoke alarms, and whereas half of home fire deaths result from fires reported at night between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. when most people are asleep. And whereas Iowa City first responders are dedicated to reducing the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries through prevention and protection education. And whereas Iowa City residents are responsive to public education measures and are able to take personal steps to increase their safety from fire, especially in their homes. And whereas the 2019 Fire Prevention Week theme, Not Every Hero Wears a Cape, Plan and Practice Your Escape, effectively reminds us to look for places fire could start, listen for the sound of the smoke alarm, and learn 2 ways out of every room. Now, therefore, I, James A. Throgmorton, Mayor of Iowa City, Iowa, do hereby proclaim October 6th through the 12th, 2019, as Fire Prevention Week throughout the city, and urge everyone to install smoke alarms and to support the many public safety activities and efforts during Fire Prevention Week 2019 and year-round. Is there anybody here to accept the proclamation? And indeed there is.
My name is Captain Humpston, and Mayor, City Council, City Manager's Office. Thank you so much for this proclamation and this opportunity. I know it takes a lot of support from the city and the public to provide us with the financial resources and personnel to put on our fire prevention activities this week. So although we do practice fire prevention all year, it is nice to have the spotlight on it this week as we go about and give our education. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, the next proclamation is for Indigenous Peoples Day.
Whereas the City of Iowa City recognizes that the indigenous peoples of the lands, which would later become known as the Americas, have occupied these lands since time immemorial and continue to play a vital role in the development of local communities and the nation. And whereas the city recognizes the fact that Iowa City is built upon the homelands and villages of the indigenous peoples of this region, without whom the building of the city would not have been possible. And whereas the city is dedicated to opposing systemic racism towards indigenous people, which perpetuates high rates of poverty and income inequality and exacerbates disproportionate health, education, and social crises. And whereas Indigenous Peoples Day was first proposed in 1977 by a delegation of Native nations to the United Nations-sponsored International Conference on Discrimination Against Indigenous Populations in the Americas. And whereas the city strongly supports the proposition that Indigenous Peoples Day shall be an opportunity to celebrate the thriving cultures and values of the indigenous peoples of the region. And whereas the city encourages all residents to acknowledge the historic sacrifices of Indigenous peoples and to recognize their contributions to the emergence and development of the city, the state, the nation, the free world, and the global economy. And whereas the city strongly encourages schools to include the teaching of Indigenous peoples' history in its curriculum, and encourages other businesses, organizations, and institutions to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day. Now, therefore, James A. Throgmorton, Mayor of Iowa City, does hereby proclaim October 14th, 2019 as Indigenous Peoples Day in Iowa City. Is there someone here to accept? Joe?
I'm Joe Coulter, Joe Nikon, my friends. On behalf of our Native community here in Iowa City and at the University of Iowa, I want to thank you for this proclamation. The actual day of Indigenous Peoples Day is next Monday, the second Monday of October. I believe that's the 14th. At noon, there will be a ceremony and a get-together up on the Pentacrest with a number of our local Native people. And again, I want to thank you, the city, the council, and all of you. Kitche Miigwech, great thanks.
Okay, the next proclamation is National Community Planning Month and World Planning Day. Whereas human well-being, health, safety, welfare, joy, creativity, and prosperity depend upon deep and regenerative connectedness between cities, suburbs, and rural areas, between the built and natural environments, between ecological processes, land use, housing, transportation, food, and consumption systems, and between economic, social, and cultural systems and networks. And whereas urban and regional planning can help proactively address urban, suburban, and rural changes to create safe, just, livable, vibrant, and welcoming communities, to provide all residents with high quality of life and sustainable choices for how and where to live, work, play, and travel, to address and redress injustices, and to protect, improve, and regenerate natural resources and ecosystems. And whereas planning activities are centered around public and democratic participation, identifying and promoting core community values, setting long and short-term future visions and goals, supporting public and private sphere decisions that promote community values, and making decisions regarding public investments and regulatory constraints. And whereas planning is most effective when public officials, stakeholders, and community members are meaningfully engaged in making decisions about the community's future, and when they support and demand visionary, practical, democratic, sustainable, and regenerative action. And whereas in the last 180 years, Iowa City has evolved into one of the most vibrant cities in the region through the collaboration and contributions of public officials, community members, stakeholders, citizens, and the University of Iowa School of Urban and Regional Planning. And whereas Iowa City promotes creativity and forward thinking in many ways, including the city's designation as a UNESCO City of Literature in 2008, its 2018 Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, and its 2019 Climate Crisis Resolution, which sets the ambitious goals of achieving a 45% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030 and net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And whereas the American Planning Association and the American Institute of Certified Planners endorse National Community Planning Month and World Town Planning Day to highlight the contributions that planning makes to the quality of cities and environments, and to recognize the dedication of the members of planning staffs, planning commissions, and other residents who contribute their time and expertise to the improvement of their cities. And whereas the Iowa chapter of the American Planning Association will be holding its annual meeting in Iowa City on October 9 through 11. Now therefore, I, James A. Throgmorton, Mayor of Iowa City, Iowa, do hereby proclaim the month of October and the day of November 8 to be National Community Planning Month and World Planning Day in the city of Iowa City, and encourage all residents, property owners, developers, nonprofit organizations, and public officials to commit to taking practical actions that will improve the quality of life and the built and natural environment for everyone in Iowa City and beyond. Is there anyone here to accept this proclamation?
Thank you. I'm Lucy Lorian in the School of Urban Regional Planning, so our work has been acknowledged in the proclamation. Thank you. I'm very proud of actually what Iowa City has been doing over the years. I've been here about 15 years, and I'm very proud of all of your accomplishments and your predecessors as well. And I think of our parks, our rec services, our swim lessons, Terry Trueblood, what we've done around the lake, a new lake, and a new park at Riverfront Crossing, soccer facilities, baseball, Little League. I mean, it's just amazing what we provide. I also think about flood management and how we've been trying to think about how to live with the river rather than against it. I think about recycling, composting, incredible progress in our composting services in the last 10 years, thanks to planning students and some of your staff as well after that. I think about your recent attempt to support affordable housing. These are really important issues that deal with social justice, racial justice, where people live and what kind of opportunities they get based on that. I think about urban growth, how fast we're growing, how vertically and horizontally we're growing. The relationship with the university, that's very complicated, affects rents, affects what kind of properties we have in our town. So there's so much going on. And what planning says to me is this is not happening in a haphazard way. It's actually thought through by you, by citizens, by people in the audience, developers, planners, staff, every day. So I understand we need to make more progress. I understand some people may be a bit dissatisfied. Things are slow. It's a hard machine to change. We need to push for more climate change mitigation, renewable energies, bike mode share. I understand there's progress to be made. But if we think of what we've accomplished, it's clear that the key actors are the planning staff and the city council and all the residents coming together. So I want to thank everyone who's been working so hard before and in the future on planning issues. It's hard because we work hard yesterday, we work hard tomorrow, and we know there's future challenges as well in the very long term. So thank you to all of you. Thank you for planning staff and everyone who's committed any of their time and energy to think about planning issues. And happy National Community Planning Month and World Planning Day.
Okay, our fifth proclamation has to do with National Disability Employment Awareness Month.
Whereas workplaces welcoming of the talents of all people, including people with disabilities, are a critical part of our efforts to build an inclusive community and strong economy. And whereas in this spirit, the City of Iowa City is recognizing National Disability Employment Awareness Month this October to raise awareness about disability employment issues and to celebrate the many and varied contributions of people with disabilities. And whereas activities during this month will reinforce the value and talent which people with disabilities add to our workplaces and communities. And whereas we affirm Iowa City's commitment to an inclusive community. Now, therefore, James A. Throgmorton, Mayor of Iowa City, Iowa, does hereby proclaim October 2019 as National Disability Employment Awareness Month and encourages employers, schools, and other community organizations in Iowa City to observe this month with appropriate programs and activities and to advance its important message that people with disabilities are equal to the task throughout the year. I know there's a group of individuals that would like to accept this proclamation and come forward.
Just say something so he knows where you are.
Come straight forward, Mike. Just straight forward. And I will hand you this proclamation right here. You turn around and, oh yeah, I'll shake your hand. Sure. Very good, congratulations.
One more. And then come to your right.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Okay, got it. Right here?
Yep.
All right.
Light is right here.
Thanks.
Yep.
After 26 years of working here, it's about time I show up at City Hall. Huh? Thank you so much. My name is Mike Honig. I'm a program coordinator at the University of Iowa Center for Disabilities and Development. I would like to thank Mayor Throgmorton, Mayor Pro Tem Taylor, City Council members, and I especially shout out to Simon for all the great work he does as ADA coordinator for the city. As I mentioned, I'm a program coordinator at the Center for Disabilities and Development. I've been in that position or in a position at CDD for 26 years. From the very beginning of that process, my employer was extremely supportive of any accommodations that I needed to do my job. And so I have felt Iowa City has been a wonderful place for me and others with disabilities to really grow our ability to work, to earn our own living, and just to feel a general part of the Iowa City community. I believe very firmly that your ongoing commitment to accessibility here in Iowa City and to barrier removal make it an ideal place for people with disabilities to obtain and maintain gainful employment. And I look forward to working we have a strong employment team over at the center, and we're going to be continuing our work and connection with the council to continue the growth of employment of people with disabilities here in Iowa City. So with that, I would like to turn it over to my colleague Patty Barr. And thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Patty Barr. I have the privilege of working with Mike over at the Council for Disability and Development, and I too would like to thank you. And I'd like to remind you that 96% of disabilities are hidden. So many of us are walking around with disabilities that you may not realize that we have disabilities. And as we age, about a third of us will have disabilities. So it's not a matter, it's sometimes just a matter of time before many of us have disabilities. But I'd like to thank you for this proclamation and for your work to include people with disabilities in the workforce. Thank you.
Many years ago, a friend of mine said to me, Jim, what you don't understand is that you are temporarily abled, and that at some point in the future, you're likely to be disabled in certain kinds of ways that you can't really predict. He was right. So thank you all. One more proclamation, and this has to do with United Way of Johnson and Washington Counties Day. Whereas for 100 years, since 1919, United Way of Johnson and Washington Counties has strived to ensure that our community's important health and human services needs are met in an atmosphere of mutual respect and trust. And whereas the historic roles of United Way of Johnson and Washington Counties include providing leadership in identifying and prioritizing community needs in the city of Iowa City and bringing together community leaders, businesses, local governments, community organizations, and committed individuals in a united effort to solve problems for those needs in our communities. And whereas the partnership between the community at large and United Way of Johnson and Washington Counties includes an emphasis on long-lasting community solutions in education, financial stability, and health through charitable giving and volunteer engagement. And whereas United Way of Johnson and Washington Counties engages and mobilizes donor investments to support organizations and nonprofit partners. And whereas the United Way of Johnson and Washington Counties is actively involved in community disaster preparedness and provides important disaster assistance and volunteer coordination in the aftermath of a disaster. And whereas the citizens of City of Iowa City receive great benefit, assistance, and services from the many United Way partner agencies, And whereas this celebration will provide the opportunity for citizens to reflect on the United Way of Johnson and Washington County's accomplishments over the past 100 years, and join United Way to continue building on our successes and move into our second century of service. Now, therefore, I, James A. Throgmorton, Mayor of Iowa City, Iowa, do hereby proclaim October the 1st, 2019, to be United Way of Johnson and Washington County's Day in celebration of their 100th year of service in the city of Iowa City, and urge all citizens to recognize their significant contribution to the community. Is anyone here to accept the proclamation?
Thank you. My name is Tim Crum. My wife and I are co-chairs of the 100-year celebration for United Way. And because of that, it's my pleasure, the pleasure falls on me to thank you for this proclamation, recognizing United Way for 100 years of service in our community. And I do so on behalf of United Way's Board of Directors and staff. Katie Knight and Tricia Smith and Terry Anderson are here with us tonight, and other staff members. And of course, a community of volunteers, both past and present, and donors that have gotten us to this point. As we reflect on 100 years, it's not so much the accomplishments that we've been reflecting on, but the how. You know, how have we endured and gotten to this point? And of course, it is because of scores of volunteers and donors and supporters, and it's also because of critical partnerships. And none more critical than the partnership that United Way has enjoyed with the city of Iowa City, with many of you as individuals, and certainly the employees of the city, and we've partnered in so many ways. Most recently, we're celebrating the 100 years through various events throughout the year. The most recent was a tree planting at Terry Trueblood in partnership with the city, so we're very grateful for that. We're grateful to Eleanor for her leadership of that event. So. Again, I just want to thank you all for the continuous support. 100 years of partnership, I mean, that's really something to think about. And know that the success that we have together in meeting the most critical needs in our community will depend on our continued collaboration, continued partnership. So thank you again.
Thank you, Tim. All right, we're going to move on to our consent calendar, but I imagine some people would like to get up, so please feel free to leave.
You're welcome to stay, too.
Right.
Okay, we're going to move on to the consent calendar, which is items 3 through 8. We're going to consider adoption of the consent calendar as presented or amended. Could I have a motion, please?
Move.
Second.
Moved by Soleil, seconded by Cole. Discussion?
Were we pulling out 6B and 6C?
No, we weren't pulling them
Why
out.
not?
We're just going
I thought you wanted to talk about them before we approved it.
discussion.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not bullying it.
Yeah, they're not being pulled. But
Okay,
if you
I
want.
misunderstood.
Yes,
Right.
we're just in discussion now, so please.
Yes, what I want to discuss is that first I have a question. My question will be where did I write my question? Yeah. I just want to ask if BART or all of the cost of the animal service and the engineering positions can be paid from fees and from the health benefit, which I mean like the benefit levy.
Yes, so the employee benefit levy can pay the benefits, not the salary.
The fees, we're not suggesting an increase in fees in either engineering or animal services to pay for any component of those personnel costs.
I see. And my other thing I want to really highlight, we hiring 2 positions on the animals services and 2 positions on the engineering. When we discussed this, it was around 6 positions, and we come up with the idea that we approve 3 positions to transfer them to permanent. And if all you remember, the 9 position was 39 people on those positions, and we make them 7 position. That's why it becomes 37 people on the 6 position, I mean. And after that, it will be approved 3 position. I'm not against approving those 2 positions to become full-time, because if it's up to me, I want all of them to be, permanent, not full-time. I want all of them to be permanent. But just think about, we have 6 positions, we choose only 3. And now we choose the 3 that have only 4 people out of the 36 people waiting to be. Now we have 3 positions left. The 3 positions have 33 people on those positions, and the other 3 positions have only 4. I just want to highlight that the city chose the 3, even after we going battle on this, and we come up with that, okay, we're gonna make 3 positions out of the 6 permanent. We choose the position have least employee, which is only 4. I hope we still have 1 more position to make it permanent. I hope the city will think really carefully and fill out that position where we have a lot of people on that position out of the 36 people that left, because this is really ridiculous. That's all I want to say about this item. But I have another item. We can go now to 8K, boxcar parking solution. I just think this is really, really a good idea that will solve a lot of maybe parking problems. And I don't know exactly, is it just to inform us about their ideas, or this is something gonna be interesting, if the council are interested in that, or I really just wanna have input in that. But this is really, I think this is a good idea, and I wanna see if it is interesting you too. I think, Jim, you said you want to talk about that. Maybe this is a good time to.
Yeah, in our work session, I mentioned that I thought it sounded like a good idea, and imagined that the staff would look into it and consider whether it's viable or not. And I'm confident that the staff will do that. The public can possibly know what we're talking about here, but it's a letter or an email we received from a member of the public or from a business. From a business, indicating the possibility of providing, this is the park and ride thing, isn't it?
It is a boxcar parking solution.
Oh, yeah, it's about using an app to enable people who are looking for parking to be able to use private street-level parking spaces with the collaboration of the owner of that private space. So there's a possibility that something could be developed there, and this person was asking us to take a look at it. And I think it's meritorious to look at it.
Sure.
And, yeah.
Yeah, I just also thought this is really a good idea. We should look into it. Number 8M, a letter from Mary Gravett. She just indicating that there is non-working sink and toilet in the library, and I don't know if you respond to her.
I know the library staff has responded. There are working sinks, there are working toilets. They have a full facilities team at the library during operations and even after the library closes. So I know they're on top of it. Yes, like any other facility, there have been problems. You may recall a few weeks ago, they had a water valve break in one of the restrooms, which closed it down and caused some damage to the second floor of the library. Occasionally, paper towels will run out before staff can fill it, but all in all, I certainly have no worries, and I don't think the library director does as well, although I know he's taken Mary's complaints very seriously and doing extra checks to make sure that the facilities are kept up to the standards that the public expects.
Okay, great. That's all I have.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Salee?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Item 9, community comment. This is a moment when anyone who wants to address the city council on any topic that is not on the formal meeting agenda should please feel free to come up and speak your mind. Take not more than 5 minutes, and when you come up, please state your name. And write it down.
Hi, my name is Brandon Ross, and I come here to talk about tasering and tasers. And some years ago, I was witness to a tasering of a young Afro-American man. He might have been 19, he might have been 20, he might have been 21. There were 5 at least policemen that were there. I think there might have been a 6th policeman, and I saw it. And the person who was being tasered was screaming, and he was screaming and screaming. And I was running up to get my daughter something from the rec center so she could play soccer. And I just want to say that in that moment, I was probably only 20 seconds, and I asked somebody what was going on, and I was told that the person had acted out. And I saw these 5 or 6 policemen trying to subdue this one man. And I just want to say these things. First of all, I want to say that I was negligent because I could have probably stepped in. And I go back and forth with that between feeling negligent and feeling like a coward. And that young man was being tortured. And I will never, ever in my whole life forget that scene. And that happened here in the city. I'm not going to go into great detail because it's probably on record, but I want to say something about tasers. And first of all, we have banned the electric share, have we not? A long time ago. Why? Because sending electric current into people, even if they're on death row, which probably they shouldn't be on, is torture. So to have tasering is torture. There are over 1,100 people who have died from tasering, okay? 1,100 people is what's reported, but police stations don't often report tasering, so we don't know exactly. Police are asked to carry around these weapons. The city and state pay for them. Corporations make money from them. It's not about safety, it's about control. These things are not very effective protectors of police if, in fact, they are being charged or threatened, where the club or the gun is faster and more effective. Not that I want anybody shot. Black people, also Latino and indigenous people, are more likely to be tasered or shot 4 times, as much as 4 times for Afro-American people. In this city, although we believe we're enlightened and we're against domestic violence and we're for indigenous people and we want fire prevention, we still allow tasering, which is torture and violent, within our city limits. Handicapped people are tasered, and sometimes it results in death. We talked today about handicapped people. Police do not know when a person is handicapped or not, yet they have been tasered. Also, psychologically, tasering takes a long time to recover from. It's like being tortured, or in other circumstances, it's like rape. It can take years. A person may never get over that. And it's also a class situation. It's meant for compliance and control. We don't see Jeffrey Epstein or Bernie Madoff or Ken Lay or white-collar white people being tasered or shot. We see black people shot. We see Latino people shot. We see indigenous people shot. And it's a sign of an unfair society. And I think the least I can do is to bring this up, to bring up my experience and to bring up the knowledge that tasering is wrong. It's wrong. We're not a barbarian society. Stop it, please, City Council. City Council, managers, the Citizen Police Board, and the Commissioner of Police, please. It's not necessary. It's not even helpful. It's a waste of money and lives, and it's torture and it's violence. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. Anyone else? Good evening.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jackie Kernick, and I live in Iowa City. I'm here today to talk about the climate crisis. I understand that there is an item on the agenda about it, but I would like to talk more generally about climate change. I came from Florida. I'm a Floridian, and my community is on the coast. So when I talk to people in Florida about climate change and sea level rise, they think that maybe in 50 years they'll have to move 1 mile inland. They don't seem to understand the systemic change that is occurring and the great danger that it is. So then I came to Iowa a year ago, and I was so excited for the cold weather. And today is October 1st, and it was a balmy 86 degrees. And that was shocking, but maybe that's normal here. My gut is that it's not normal. And I really appreciate what the city has done. I know that you guys are progressive on your climate policies and acknowledge it, unlike the state of Florida. They couldn't even talk about climate change in an open way. But I would like to point out to the strategic plan that's listed here. I didn't even know this would be up, but almost every single one of these goals, I can draw an immediate reference to climate change, but yet they're not listed there. And I think the first thing that we have to do if we're going to be really serious for our young people about the climate crisis is to call it at every chance we can and to say that it's not sustainability. It's a crisis because our climate is changing and we can no longer sustain these actions if we want to continue to live in this world. I'm also married. I'm 27 years old. My mother had me when she was 27. I'm not sure if I should have children. I really, really don't know what kind of world they're going to live in. And so with all of these things to keep in mind, I want us to not do fake solutions on climate change. When we talk about Mid-American Energy, I was so excited to know about how much wind comes from Iowa. We actually moved here so that my husband could study wind energy at Kirkwood Community College. But what I didn't know is that all of the wind energy that is made by Mid-American is actually shipped to other states. It's not kept in Iowa. So the actual energy that's powering this building and our homes is likely non-renewable energy like coal or natural gas, which is actually not a solution. We say that natural gas is a solution or something that can transition us, but methane is 10 times, at least 10 times, more dangerous than CO2. So when we're thinking about climate action, I encourage us to not look at false solutions, and I encourage us to be very bold. I was also really happy when I moved to Iowa City to find that there's such refugee populations here in Iowa City. It's amazing to see all of the people that have come from war-torn places, places that weren't viable for them, and have made Iowa City their home. So I encourage us to declare a climate crisis and to say that we are taking climate refugees and to understand what that means. A climate refugee might be a farmer that is only 20 miles outside of Iowa City because their livelihood is no longer viable with the weather patterns that are happening. So again, I thank you guys and I encourage strong action. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Good evening.
Is this where I put that sticker? Okay.
Yes, and when you speak, please speak into the microphone. And state your name when you begin.
Hi, my name is Grace Hamill. I'm a registered nurse at the University of Iowa. I come to you today. I've never attended a city council meeting, but I feel the need that I need to speak up. I was recently in Washington, D.C. at Capitol Hill, where cannabis law reformation is a really huge topic. The reason why I think we need to be concerned about it is it's here. It's not going anywhere. With Illinois just recently legalizing, I think that we're going to see an increase of incarcerated students who are trying to come to the University of Iowa to better their lives and their futures. I want to point out that the Safe Bank Act was recently passed with a 321 to 103 vote, showing that legalization and regulation of cannabis is superior to public policy versus prohibition and criminalization. My goal as a registered nurse I work in the operating room, and I see a lot of patients come in, trauma patients from motor vehicle accidents or whatever, that are prescribed opioids, and I'm sure everyone in this room can attest to being affected by someone that they know that has suffered an opioid death or overdose or in some type of addiction or way of that. I had to watch my favorite trauma surgeon cry because he recently learned of a patient of his that we had put his leg back together. Anyways, he was prescribed an opioid and took it incorrectly and died from that. And it's an issue. It's a real issue. You had mentioned earlier with talking about the Metro Coalition. I'm not sure what that is, but any type of awareness and education. I think education is what our community needs. And I think that the University of Iowa, being a leader in innovation and research, would be the prime place to have this education instilled in our curriculum. Washington State, as well as other states that have legalized fully, are including this in their curriculum. I think that it needs to start with education, and as a healthcare professional, I owe it to all of you as the public and our public to be educated on new medicine that's coming out, because we can't just keep putting the blinders up, or it's going to be detrimental to our society. I think that there are a lot of these the 7 goals where cannabis could actually help that. I think that if we could bring in education and maybe allow for the MORE Act, which is the Marijuana Opportunity and Reinvestment and Expungement Act, that would alleviate a lot of people that have been charged with simple cannabis misdemeanors back into the voting society. I think that would strengthen the relationship between law enforcement and our community, which seems to be an issue here with it being a college town. There are a lot of college members, students here that, they want to find a safe, effective way to alleviate their anxiety, to help them focus for studying, to help them with migraines or pain or whatever the situation may be, that cannabis has proven to have a place in medicine. And they're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to lose tax dollars that could be used in the state as resources to maintain a solid financial foundation. That's something that cannabis could help. The young lady that spoke earlier about our environment, cannabis reproduces 4 times for a crop season. Once a tree is cut down, that tree can't grow again, whereas cannabis can go through 4 crop cycles, hemp specifically, and that can clean our soils with us being an agricultural state. There's a lot of buzz going on right now in Davenport with more and more CBD shops opening. There's rumor that a restaurant that's going to have CBD-infused plates is going to be started as well. And I think instead of putting up the blinders because we're not a fully legal state, I think that we need to take action and start with education, because the University of Iowa, like I said, being the leaders in research and innovation, we should be on top of this and providing education and safety and awareness to our public, our healthcare professionals. There's a lot that goes into this. I also think that it could help maybe with some of these housing budget issues that were being discussed earlier, because if we started a lab that could create testing for safety and efficacy, that would help create jobs. It's a huge multi-billion-dollar industry that, for whatever reason, Iowa isn't capitalizing on, and I'm not really quite sure why. Is we're the leaders of research. We're the first caucusing state. We have a lot of respect. Me not knowing anything about politics and going to D.C., I had immediate respect walking in there. Everyone wanted to talk to me because I'm from Iowa, and I think that says a lot about our state, and I think that we could really help not just our states, but our neighboring states, but also like our nation. And I would like to start with education at the university. I'm a certified cannabis nurse. I've taken the extra steps to get extra education, and I've attended several conferences across the nation to be able to safely and factually provide information and to teach.
Great.
Sorry,
Thank
that
you,
was too
Grace. But
long.
you've gone over 5 minutes.
I'm sorry.
Thanks so much. And thanks for coming
Okay.
down, too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What do I do next?
You just
Have a
sit
seat.
and watch, listen to the rest of the meeting, or go home,
Sorry for taking up so
or
much
wherever.
Okay. I'm sorry.
You're fine.
I'm itching to get up here. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
This is also my first city council meeting. I've lived in Iowa City for 3 years. And
Could you please state your name, please?
Oh, yeah. My name is Erin Kay. I'm the WAC manager for NAMI Johnson County. If you guys are unfamiliar with NAMI, we're the National Alliance on Mental Illness of Johnson County. We provide education, advocacy, and support for people experiencing mental illness in Johnson and Lynn County. I do fundraising and development. I've raised over $350,000 for people experiencing mental illness in Johnson County. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here to talk about Disabilities Employment Awareness Month. I'm super excited that you guys have this proclamation. That's amazing. I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm employed in Johnson County, but there's lots of PWDs, people with disabilities, who don't get the opportunities to be in the workforce. So 20% of the United States workforce identifies as having some kind of a disability. The rest, 69%, is able-bodied. Like Mike was saying earlier, we're here, we're capable, we can get the job done. I think the slogan for Disability Employment Awareness Month is like, we can do it and we can do it right. Take a chance on a person with a disability. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of discrimination out there for people with disabilities. When I roll into a room, and I'm literally rolling into a room, am I right? I can't pass as an able-bodied person, and I don't want to. My disability, I have cerebral palsy, it's a critical part of who I am, but that doesn't make me any less professional. That doesn't make me any less capable. And please consider employing people with disabilities, whether it's very visible, like mine, or it's invisible. Please consider it. We want to be out in the community working. We want to be helping our communities in so many ways. Please give us that chance. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you for coming, Erin.
Yeah, no problem.
Hi, name's Christian Siggy. Last week, you guys were discussing two things, one at the work session, which was parking on Dodge Street, and the other one was like Tamarack Trail discussion and about new roads being put in. And you guys brought up the thing of, in the work session, about how trying to plan bike lanes and bike friendliness after the fact is hard. And then Tamarack Trail, you discussed about building a new road. Why not, whenever we build new roads, we automatically put bike lanes on them in the sense that even if they don't have bike capability at the time, down the road when everything gets more bike friendly, they're already there and we're not trying to redevelop old systems that could have been handled, now. So 20 years, 15 years, 5 years, however long it takes to connect to them, they're already there and we're not having to re-engineer what we literally could have done before it was even done. So that's just something I want you to think about.
Thank you, Lee. Anyone else? Okay, I don't see anyone else, so we'll move to item 10. Sorry. Item 10A, Planning and Zoning Matters, Regulating Plan Amendment 625 South Gilbert Street. This is an ordinance amending the Riverfront Crossings Regulating Plan to include the property located at 625 South Gilbert Street in the Central Crossing Subdistrict. I'll open the public hearing and turn things over to Danielle. Hi, Danielle.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Danielle Sisman, NDS. This is the first of two items related to the potential redevelopment of this property by Capstone Collegiate Properties, LLC, represented by Davis Maxwell and including Mike Welch from Axiom Consultants. I'm going to present both of them kind of simultaneously to you since they contain sort of similar criteria for evaluation. Then there'll be two different opportunities for votes, and I believe legal counsel has advised you as to the status of the CZA. So to start with, we're talking about the changes to the zoning code, the regulating plan contained in the zoning code having to do with the form-based code for one property at 625 South Gilbert Street. There is, as I said, another case tonight for rezoning. The proposed development is an 8-story residential building and has undergone the Good Neighbor meeting process for that rezoning. The property is located just north of the railroad, just west of Gilbert along Prentice Street. Shown here in the outlined white dashed, there are two properties, two different sub-districts of the form-based code involved in this. The rezoning involves changing two different zoning districts to a riverfront crossing designation of one sort or another. The two current zoning districts are shown on this map in red and gray. They include intensive commercial and CC2 rezoning. This is the concept plan that was presented to the Planning Commission. This is just a preliminary concept plan, not necessarily the site plan that we would be reviewing. It shows an 8-story building, as I mentioned, approximately 178 dwelling units. The concept currently shows 3 lower levels for parking and 5 upper levels for dwelling units. That type of concept would require a bonus height request to be made under the rezoning, and that would likely involve the City Council, so it would be more than the ability of staff to approve under the code requirements. The concept plan also does show improvements along Ralston Creek and pedestrian connections to South Gilbert Street. For orientation, Prentice Street is along the north here, and the building stretches along Ralston Creek, which is along its western perimeter. The property does fall within the downtown and riverfront crossings master plan. It falls within 2 sub-districts of the form-based code that would be currently shown in pink and yellow here. The yellow district is the Gilbert sub-district. The southern portion of the subject property is currently designated for future rezoning to South Gilbert District, and the pink district along the north is Central Crossings Subdistrict, and like I said, also intended for Riverfront Crossings rezoning to that subdistrict. The regulating plan amendment asks to include all of the property into one subdistrict rather than have it split between those two, and they've requested to be have the map in the form-based code changed so that they would both the entire subject property would fall into Central Crossings. The two sub-districts have distinctive objectives, regulations, and standards. This table compares kind of the most critical ones of that. The uses are very similar across all of Riverfront Crossings. The sub-districts vary somewhat in some of their descriptions and their character. The most important difference here, though, is the base and bonus height maximums, which are shown in this table. Central Crossings has a higher number of stories allowed and a higher number of bonus height stories that would be allowed than the Gilbert subdistrict.
So the review criteria that staff uses both for this case and the next one are very similar. They're both related to zoning code changes or changes to the zoning designation. We look at conformance with the comprehensive plan and the compatibility with existing neighborhoods. So I'll just go through all of those criteria in one go with one presentation for you right here. As far as compliance with the comprehensive plan, as I said, it is located in the downtown and riverfront Crossings master plan, and is envisioned to be a mix of residential and commercial uses. The red outline shows again the proposed redevelopment site. The black dashed line shows you the current boundary between the different sub-districts. And the white outline of the buildings and the beige outline of the buildings indicate in the master planning process which properties were envisioned for future redevelopment. In this drawing, you'll see the building to the north is white, and that was contemplated by the master plan for redevelopment. The building to the south is shown in beige and was not really anticipated to redevelop. In comparing the two sub-districts, the Central Crossing Sub-District is more focused on moderate-scale residential development to address the need for housing close to downtown. The Gilbert Sub-District, which is mostly built out to the north of the rail line, calls for no major transformations and envisions the area south of the railroad to develop at a lower intensity to maintain smaller scale and lower intensity of uses. The subject property, however, as I pointed out, is north of that rail line and falls on the northern side there, and therefore not really part of what the master plan envisioned redevelopment occurring in the Gilbert subdistrict. So therefore, and also due to the proximity to Ralston Creek, both subdistricts have objectives to restore and enhance the conditions along Ralston Creek. The Central Crossing District goes a little farther and has goals related to returning the creek to an asset to the community and stimulating development along its banks. This proposal will encourage the improvements to the creek is intended to encourage new residential development in the area. So by rezoning the subject property into a zone that allows residential uses, redevelopment is encouraged along the creek. Staff has proposed some conditions on the rezoning that I'll get to when we talk about rezoning specifically, basically to encourage and formalize those improvements to the creek, including removal of invasive species, stream bank stabilization, and tree planting subject to city forester review. The second review criteria, again, is compatibility with existing neighborhood, so we'll go through that just quickly here. The existing neighborhood is largely seen redevelopment happen in multi-story residential format, anywhere from 3 to 5 stories to the north, east, and west. There is a railroad with a raised overpass immediately to the south. The applicant did provide massing studies as part of their application to kind of demonstrate what their potential 8-story building could look like. There's a bit of elevation difference from Dubuque Street down to Ralston Creek and then back up to Prentice. The site is located adjacent to the creek, so it's kind of in that valley between the two roadways. These are the massing studies images showing on the left the view from Dubuque Street looking east. The white building in the background is the proposed potential form of an 8-story building. Again, the image on the right, the white massing would be as if looking from north up Gilbert Street. These images again show it from other views as it is at a lower elevation than Gilbert Street. It does not end up being that much taller than the buildings around it. I know the applicant is here tonight, so they can certainly speak to the massing study if you have questions about that. Staff did review traffic implications and access. Much of the site is accessed from, or proposed to be accessed from, property that is not a public right-of-way, and so those agreements would need to be negotiated with the surrounding property owners. Those are details that would be worked out as the final site plan is developed. Staff is aware of those, the need for those agreements to be in place, and that could certainly impact final design for the applicant, depending on whether they're able to secure those access agreements. Staff has included conditions on the rezoning for acquisition of additional public right-of-way along Gilbert Street to allow for the sidewalk to be located farther away from the busy street to improve pedestrian connections throughout the neighborhood. There is floodplain in the vicinity of this development, and the applicant would need to comply with all the city's floodplain management regulations for flood proofing and minimum floor elevations as they proceed with their design formulation. We also look at environmentally sensitive areas, including Ralston Creek and the 30-foot buffer around Ralston Creek that would be required, and the need for stormwater control. As far as next steps goes, this shows in blue the step what we're currently talking about with the first application, which is the zoning code text change. The next agenda item for you would be that rezoning, which is the next step down. If the bonus height request exceeds staff's ability to make a determination, then the applicant's case would come back to you again for bonus height discussion at a level 2 design review. There also would be a form-based code design review conducted by staff and final site plan review by staff as well. So based on review for compliance with applicable criteria and standards, staff recommended approval of the proposed zoning code text change to alter the regulating plan of the Riverfront Crossings form-based code to include the property located at 625 South Gilbert Street in the Central Crossings subdistrict. At their September 5th meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 6-0 to also recommend that to you tonight with no conditions on the text change. Like I said, the rezoning case would come next, and there are some conditions there I could explain when we get to that. I think that concludes my staff report for this one.
Thanks, Danielle. Do any of you have any questions?
I have a question about the access agreements with the neighbors. Do you anticipate there being any pushback, or will there be?
It's until they have an agreement, they don't have an agreement. The applicant can talk to you about their progress in negotiating that. It's just something that we need to be aware of as we review. We don't want to make assumptions until there's actually formal agreements made.
Maybe if you could just briefly elaborate on what the sort of the public benefits are to get the bonus height provisions.
So bonus height, there's several ways to apply for bonus height. In this case, they're looking at public art, donation or fee in lieu for public art, and then also invoking the ability to make energy efficiency or certain environmental improvements. So they've discussed energy efficiency in their building and also improvements to Ralston Creek to improve the function of the creek as a natural both drainage and ecosystem.
I believe you mentioned something about a good neighbor meeting, but I couldn't see in the notes that they had one.
They did have one. Not a large turnout for the meeting. The applicant can talk to you about the feedback they did receive from the neighborhood, but they did conduct one because of the rezoning.
Okay.
Danielle, I want to ask about the parking and traffic implications first. So if I understand correctly, the building, if it's 8 stories and so on, would have 259 residential parking spaces. As far as I know, that would be the second largest building we would be approving in the Riverfront Crossings District other than the Rise, which is actually 2 buildings. And it has a lot more parking than, at least I think it does, than this building does. So I'm wondering about the traffic implications associated with the parking spaces and the use of the parking. I wonder, I didn't see anything in the staff report about that. I wonder if you could comment on the staff's assessment of traffic implications.
Sure. So the parking numbers are based on the unit count and the number of bedrooms, so they would be complying with our code. Depending on the mix of 1 and 2 or 3 bedroom units, the parking numbers could change. The parking is required on site so that it doesn't impact the neighborhood, so that there's adequate place for the residents of that building to store their vehicles. Now, when they travel in their vehicles, that's when they hit the road. This particular site is adjacent to an arterial street, so there would not be a long connection route for traffic to travel from residents dwelling to wherever they may be going for the day by vehicle. So staff did not have concern about traffic generated from this site because of the placement of the site in proximity to existing street networks.
I asked the question in part because we are anticipating a 4 to 3 lane conversion on Gilbert Street going down to Kirkwood. with bike trails or bike lanes on either side of that 4 to 3 lane conversion. And I'm a bit concerned about the amount of traffic that would be generated by this particular development. But I just simply wanted to ask the question to get something on the record about it.
I know Kent Ralston's spoken to you in the past about the volumes that a 4 to 3 lane conversion could handle, and I don't know if we'd want to check with him if this roadway is nearing that capacity and if this would make an impact. But he is aware of the application, so.
Okay, and I have a related question, which doesn't have anything directly to do with traffic, but has to do with the building. So the proposal is ultimately to build an 8-story building with parking on the first 3 floors. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So what effect would a large 8-story building with 3 floors of parking at the base have on the pedestrian friendliness, the walkable character of that part of the Riverfront Crossings District? And when I ask the question, I'm knowing that one of the purposes of the Riverfront Crossings District is to create a more walkable and diverse environment, a more urban kind of environment. So I wonder what the staff's thoughts are about that.
Well, the form-based code does have regulations in it as for the experience, for the exterior of the building and those lower 3 floors. So what would not be allowed would be a blank-faced wall 3 stories high immediately adjacent to the street front. The intention of the form-based code is that regardless of what's happening in the building, the pedestrian's experience from the exterior is much the same. So whether you have parking in there or residential units in there or commercial use in there, my hope would be that the form-based code could handle that. We've had consultants talk to us in the past about the importance of the interaction of the ground floor with the pedestrian realm. So we're certainly aware that that's a concern, and when we do design review, that's something that we do look at and scrutinize.
When I look at, and this, what I'm looking at now is in the developer's piece that was in here, and even looking at what you've presented to us, Danielle, very little, if I'm looking at this right, very little of the building is going to be adjacent to Gilbert Street, just the very south end of it, like adjacent to the railroad track,
Right.
is the only place that's going to come out to South Gilbert. So, and the only other place it would be adjacent to an existing street would be along East Prentice Street. So it would seem to me that rather than potentially having a negative impact on the pedestrian experience, the fact that there's going to be, would appear to be a trail along the south side of the building and kind of a meandering trail close to Ralston Creek, it has the potential to actually improve the pedestrian experience with the improvement of Ralston Creek and a trail along there.
That's a fair statement.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Danielle?
Danielle, what's the height of the, on the west side of Ralston Creek? There's some new development going in, and what's the height of that?
That's a 4-story building. I don't have the exact height in feet, but it's regulated by stories.
It's the applicant has submitted something on page 184 of your packet. That property is 225 Prentice, and they have that listed at 710 feet, with their proposal for the 8-story building on the subject property being at 742 feet, so approximately 32 feet taller than what's being built currently across the creek.
So that elevation is the top of the building elevation above sea level? Is that, what is the 740?
I'd have the developers team answer that.
Sure it is. It's above sea level.
Yeah.
Were you going to follow up?
No, I just,
okay.
The height of the building relative to the ground that it sits on is 3 stories, you said, correct?
For the adjacent building?
The one on the west side.
West side, that's a 4-story building.
4-story building, sorry.
So with regard to that, the building right across the street houses Trumpet Blossom. And Trumpet Blossom is a 1-story building. So I've walked all around that site. I did it yesterday on foot. And the pedestrian experience walking around the building is very, very different from the renderings that we see in the submittal or in the application. So this concerns me. And the fairly new building directly across the street on Prentice is, if I remember rightly, a 5-story building. So I have concerns. We'll get into them a little bit more later on in this discussion. Any other questions for Danielle?
Nope.
Okay, thank you, Danielle. I don't know if anybody else would like to speak, and if you do, please do. But I would like to hear from the developer. I personally have some questions I would like to ask the developer.
Good evening. Mike Welch with Axiom Consultants, and I'm here representing the developer. Davis Maxwell with Capstone Collegiate Communities is also here as well, so we can maybe kind of alternate and probably get all your questions answered, I would think. I guess I'll start just kind of that regulating plan and maybe kind of working backwards and taking some of the things you talked about most recently first. John, just to answer your question, that top of the building is 742 feet above sea level. For comparison, the 500-year floodplain elevation on Ralston Creek there is, let me get my numbers here, 657 feet above sea level. So we're looking at a total maximum building height of 85 feet, which would kind of be a code and building code maximum for that type of building. And I think we did talk about the building at 225 Prentice Street, always known as like Pasha 4, that Hodge built, and that one is 710 feet. That's 5 stories. The thing that we looked at, I think is really important to point out, is at the corner of Dubuque and Prentice, we have the other Hodge building, the first one that they built, and the top of that building is at 736 feet. So our building proposed is only 6 feet higher than that structure. I think that hill on Prentice Street is really a really important part that helps this building at 8 stories fit into that space. Mayor Throgmorton, I think to your concern about how Trumpet Blossom fits, and we're across the street at 8 stories. The building next to Trumpet Blossom is 5 stories, and it's a big 5-story building. So I think if you look on the document that Jeff referred to, there's kind of a dashed line. You can see that height comparison of that building. We do not have that eve height of that building. We can get that for you and kind of help. I think when we get to if rezoning goes through and we get to the design stage, we obviously can look at that. And I think also produce some renderings that kind of maybe address your concern of when you're a pedestrian on Prentice Street, how do those building heights compare and how do those relationships work? At this stage, our thought was when we look at other buildings, other tall buildings in Iowa City, a lot of them you can really see from around other parts of the city or other further away. And for us, in looking at this one, it really was unique how this building sits down in the valley along Ralston Creek. I think other things to point out, I know during our P&Z meeting, one of the concerns was in changing the regulating plan and how that changes for that property, the 625 South Gilbert property, and why should we make that change, or should we make that change? We really look at it looking at the master plan and the intent of the master plan and the thought process in the master plan. I think it's really important to note that it didn't consider 625 redeveloping. It really was looking at the 2 properties on Prentice Street, the City Electric properties. And so I think when we look at, if you are doing all 3 properties, it's hard to imagine what a property that's next to the railroad track that's limited to 3 stories, what that would look like when the railroad tracks are 17 feet above the finished floor elevation that's there. And so when you do a 3-story building, you're kind of at the top of that building isn't much higher than the tracks. And scale-wise, that just doesn't seem to be consistent with the intent of riverfront crossings if you would consider 625 redeveloping. I think in the context of this whole property redeveloping, when you look at the changes to Prentice Street, right now it's one continuous curb cut across the front of this property, and there are buildings right up to the right-of-way or the property line of Ralston Creek. Part of this redeveloping would be changing that streetscape to make it more pedestrian-friendly and be pulling that building back to get that 30-foot floodplain buffer in there plus the 5-foot setback from that buffer. So I think when you imagine standing there at Ralston Creek on Prentice Street, looking south down Ralston Creek, it really would open up that stream corridor. And that's part of the process too, is we looked at this site of how we can get that height bonus, but also how the developer can take this building and take that required 30-foot buffer and turn that into an amenity, not only for the residents of the building, but also in working with the city to find a way to improve Ralston Creek and hopefully make it kind of a connection point in the starting of changes to Ralston Creek from here going south to the park, and really make that over time a corridor that actually attracts pedestrians to the creek rather than putting everyone on Gilbert Street. I think the other aspects that we can talk about probably relate more to the overall rezoning and less to the regulating plan change. I guess the one last thing I would say is with the shared access easement. I know that came up. Currently, that alley is being shared, but that is private property. The developers and the current property owner have reached out to the neighbor and kind of started those conversations, but really I think until we get through this process, it's hard to have serious conversations and really decide what that agreement might or might not look like.
I'm curious if you could talk about, in particular, the public amenities along Ralston Creek. What, just for the audience's benefit, what specifically are you intending to do there? How will that be improved if this is authorized?
Yeah, I think, and I believe it was in your packet too. There's kind of a black and white sketch of a concept of what that could look like. But a big part of what we've discussed to this point is finding a way to take, like most portions of Ralston Creek right now are either really brushy and kind of like with the invasive plants, or have been stabilized with either concrete, riprap, tile, like the current. We did have a wetland investigation done on that portion of Ralston Creek as part of this project. And I don't know if you've looked at that, but the entire bottom of the creek has concrete tile in it that was put in years ago. So we're looking at things like that. How do we make the Ralston Creek actually a natural creek again with a natural bottom, less susceptible to that flashy flooding that Ralston Creek sees, and how do we incorporate that in a way that incorporates native plants or vegetation of some sort instead of riprap and armored banks. And then a part of that too is we have a trail there. Typically we like to put our trails up nice and high so that they don't get inundated in floods. Are there opportunities to get people a place to actually interact with the creek? Is there a chance in the future that this becomes a point where you can launch a kayak or small craft and paddle down Ralston Creek? Obviously that's a big if, and would take a lot of work with city and public works and to work that out. But I think those are the types of ways that we're looking at it. And as I said, in talking to the developer and their team, they really do see that space on the west side of the building as an amenity for the residents of their building, and a way to kind of separate themselves from maybe some of the other large buildings that are in urban centers that are curb to curb building. They do have an opportunity there to see that as an amenity. And I think it's important to note too that Ralston Creek is actually in city right of way. So in addition to the 30 feet on their property, there's a 60-foot right of way on Ralston Creek, plus the 30-foot buffer on the opposite side. So in working with the city, there does seem to be many options for how to make those things happen.
Public access.
Public access, yep.
Perfect.
I like that feature a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I want to clarify one point. You were just describing the southern portion, that part that's down by the railroad tracks.
Yes.
And you described how a 3-story building there would sort of be looking at the railroad tracks, and the elevated part that it's on. But there's also a possibility for a 2-story height bonus for the zone that it would be rezoned to, the riverfront crossing zone that it would be rezoned to if it were
correct. If it stayed in South Gilbert.
Yeah, so it could be a 5-story building down there instead of a 3-story building, right?
It could, yep. I guess
Just in principle, right?
Yes, and I think the other part that we looked at in looking at how to develop this piece is, again, if you look at that master plan, it kind of shows a lot of surface parking in a small building. And we really looked at this being at this point in downtown. We're just about 1,200 feet from campus. That surface parking probably isn't, in our opinion at least, the best use for a property this close to downtown. That doing something with structured parking and kind of maximizing that footprint is, in our opinion, kind of beneficial, especially when you consider that you do have that 30-foot floodplain buffer, so you do have some green space on there. And overall, the project would reduce the impervious area on those 3 parcels from what's there today as proposed.
Okay. I want to ask a series of questions that will sound a bit aggressive.
Thank you for the
But,
notice.
that's our job, to really make sure we're making a good decision. So I am repeatedly asked by owners of apartment complexes, managers of rental property, and residents of this city, why are we building all these new apartment buildings when the vacancy rates are so high and many storefront spaces are going empty? I hear it all the time. So my questions to you are several, actually. What persuades you, meaning the developer, what persuades you that an 8-story building, apartment building, is a wise market investment at this time? And I'll just keep going because you'll understand how these flow together. What do you project the vacancy rates to become? No, what data do you have about current vacancy rates in rental apartments? What do you project the rates to become in the near-term future? What gives you confidence that the occupancy rates in the proposed building will be sufficient from a market point of view, from an investor's point of view? And have you considered possible changes over the next few years with regard to enrollments at the University of Iowa and the possibility of the university requiring second-year students to live on campus? In other words, the last thing I want to see is a very large half-empty new apartment building or some others that have also recently been built. So help me out.
I'm going to defer to Davis on like every one of those questions, I think. Thank you.
How you doing?
Well, Mayor and Council, my name is Davis Maxwell. I am the developer, Capstone Collegiate Communities. It's the company that I work for and represent. And thank you on behalf of not only me, but also the Boyd family to get up here and let my team present. Mr. Mayor, you asked a series of those questions, and I totally understand your concern. We develop and manage student housing all across the country, and this is one market that we would love to be in. We have looked at this site. The 8-story building is roughly 400 beds, and when we look at all of our comps in the immediate surrounding area, specifically the Rise, they're pushing 100% occupancy. As it relates to vacancy rates in the immediate area, vacancy rates from our market study, we have a market consultant out of Ohio who goes out. They present these market studies to Capstone to give us a level of confidence that vacancy rates in this immediate area are low. We feel strong about the market. We feel strong about enrollment growth of the University of Iowa. How does the university, when they require a second-year live-on requirement, how does that affect Capstone and the development? That is something of concern. However, we feel that by providing a quality Class A student housing development that's highly amenitized is going to help pull residents out of surrounding neighborhoods to get them closer to school, get them closer to campus, get them closer to downtown to enjoy their college experience. Anything else? To be more specific.
I think I want to go over just a little bit of that.
Okay, go ahead.
You said you have a market consultant, and I'm not surprised to hear that.
Sure.
And if I heard you correctly, the market consultant has looked carefully at rental vacancy rates in Iowa City, or at least the core part of Iowa City?
That is correct. We actually had it's a group called Danner and Associates. They're out of Columbus, Ohio. They're our market consultant. I have one report dated as of February 27th, 2019. They're actually in the market last week. I should have the updated report. It should be back this week as well.
Can you share that with us, or at least the data, maybe not the report, because that would be, I don't know, private property?
That's something that I would be happy to do. I don't have a problem doing that.
Good. And Danner and Associates looked at our rental market and concluded that the vacancy rates are, what, 6%, 7%, 8%, 10%? What?
Mr. Mayor, in the report, we'll have to review the report, but the vacancy rates that they projected for the immediate area are less than 5%.
Okay.
And there's, we look at not only just the purpose-built student housing. You have Rise, you have Latitude, you have Quarters, Hawks Ridge. You also have the shadow market, which is a lot of what we see around town, but also market rate apartments as well. And from his report and his findings, the majority of all of the market rate developments here around Iowa City are occupied by residents who attend the University of Iowa. So that's factual and in the report that I'll be happy to share with you guys. The majority of those housing units for market rate workforce housing, they are housing students who attend the University of Iowa. So if we can provide a quality Class A development adjacent to the college, University of Iowa, downtown, and Riverfront Crossing, that'll give us the ability to pull residents out of surrounding neighborhoods to where families, people in the workforce, millennials that are living, to come and enjoy a college experience that's adjacent to downtown. And I think this immediate area where we are right now, vacancy rates are going to be less than 5%. They're probably going to be closer to 2%, if not less.
Okay, I'll ask one more follow-up question, and then I'm sure other people might want to ask you questions too, so I don't want to monopolize things. With regard to the University of Iowa, we don't know what they're going to do with regard to second-year students. I don't know, you don't know, but there's uncertainty there. Okay, but with regard to enrollments, again, I have no facts about this, but I can tell you that I have heard conversations on the campus from people involved in the university about risk associated with declining enrollments. And I think this is true for public universities nationwide. I think it is, and you should know, right? I mean, because this is kind of your work. And this has to do with something having to do with demographics and, I don't know, the 2008 recession, or I don't know the details. So could you elaborate briefly on your assessment of that risk and how it affects the developers thinking about investing in an 8-story building in this site?
That is a valid concern. And you hear articles all the time with smaller universities, enrollments declining. Major universities, we don't know the future, what's going to happen at the University of Iowa. But we do know this is a Tier 1 university. We know that you have residents that continue, or you have students that continue to come to the University of Iowa because of all of the great curriculums that they have to offer. I feel that this location, the proximity to campus, the proximity to downtown, regardless of what enrollment does in the future, if not stays flat, I think this will be a very successful development in order to pull residents from their homes, the commuters, from the people that are the potential resident base that is traveling from far away. I feel that by providing them a quality development in this particular location, regardless of what happens to enrollment, I think that students will always want to live closest to campus because of the accessibility that the development will have to offer to the resident that will be occupying the unit.
Okay, thank you, Davis. Do any of the rest of you have questions for Davis?
I just want to ask you, you said this is mainly student housing?
Actually, our target market, we have 12-month leases, and anybody can live at our development. But we lease by the bedroom, so if you have a 2 or 3 bedroom unit that you stand alone financially from your roommate in the event of whatever happens. So you're responsible for your bedroom, you share the common area.
And this furnished, you mean?
I'm sorry?
It will be furnished?
These units would be fully furnished. And anybody can live there. So, but we require, as a management company, not only are we the developer, but we're also our own management company as well. We require 1 head per bed is what we like to look at it. So if you and your boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, anybody can live here, but if you're a couple, we want you to have 1 person per bed. So we're not discriminating against who can live there. You can live there, I can live there, anybody can live there. However, our target market that we will go after and aggressively market will be the students who attend the University of Iowa.
I know you can say you don't discriminate against, but the way that you lay it out is really for a student. Like if a household of like wife and husband and 1 child, they're not gonna rent like 1 bedroom for the child for this price and that's a bedroom and it will be little.
Right, well, that would be accurate. We would require you to lease a 3-bedroom unit. And that's our standard, and that's what we do all across the country, and that would be the policy that we would have here for the residents who would like to live there. But we're going to request that you sign a 12-month lease, and it's 1 head per bed. So it might be not, economically feasible or practical for you to live in a 3-bedroom unit if it's husband, wife, and an infant.
It's still going to be very expensive because it's room by room. Anyway, I guess my point is, nothing against the student.
I'm sorry?
Nothing against the student. I love them. But it feels like any developer come for Riverfront Crossing, they do something for a student. And suddenly one day we're going to see all the Riverfront Crossing, all the new development will be only for students. Like the rest of the community, they don't have any, like I don't know what to say, but the rest of the community, that they don't have the opportunity to live in that area because any developer will come, we do the same thing that you do, all about money, and make it very high for the student. Yes, that's what I think.
Could you elaborate a little bit on the description, kind of on the lines of what Councilwoman Salee is getting at? You mentioned that they would share the common area. So are they just bedroom units, or describe the layout of it?
So we would offer let's start with a 2-bedroom unit or a 3-bedroom unit. So all of our units, you would walk in, you would have 1 big common area. You would have a kitchen, you would have a living room, seating area. It would all be 1 big open room. And then within each bedroom, whether it's a 1, 2, or 3, you would enter off the common area to get into your bedroom. And each bedroom would have its own walk-in closet as well as private bath. So we're going to individually lock each one of those rooms. So you might lease unit, for example, unit 101, and you're going to be bedroom A. I might be bedroom B. So we share that common area, but you're leasing that bedroom.
Same thing like the Rise, basically. I toured the Rise, and it was like that. You just rent the room, 1 bedroom, you have your own bathroom, and you have everything and you share the kitchen and the living room.
Yeah, like you would have a roommate, right?
Just like you have a roommate, yeah.
But you stand alone financially in case somebody defaults on their rent. It's not your responsibility
Exactly.
or whoever your guarantor is guaranteeing that lease amount.
Thank you.
Yeah, and to tell you, just for the audience to know, so I can really tell you that no family can live there. The rise is the one bedroom there is around 740 something, and no 80 something, and the affordable 10% affordable is a different 740, and the other one is 780. The affordable and the non-affordable, the different only like $40. I just said that because I want to tell you how expensive it will be, because it's furnished also.
Are there any other questions for Davis?
Thank you.
No other questions? Thanks.
Mr. Mayor,
There might be some follow-up questions. You know.
I'll get,
Would anybody else like to address this topic?
Hi, my name's Christian again. So I used to live in Kennedy Plaza, which is actually across the Railroad Street and across the street from it. And I have real kind of concerns with putting an 8-story building right next to a railroad track. As somebody who lived in those apartments, it's not a fun thing to do, living in right by that railroad track that gets work done all times of the day. So something to think about, do we really want to put something that close to the railroad station that is going to house these students? Plus, this is going from a commercial building that housed, a fairly commercialized area to no commercial space. Like, we are taking away commercial space in a very commercialized area. I question whether or not that's a good idea, so.
Thank you. Hey, Austin.
Hello there, Austin Wu, USG City Liaison. Let's see, for this development, I think there are some things that are pretty neat. The potential restorations to Ralston Creek are pretty nice. I think everyone can agree that it doesn't look so great right now. The addition of additional housing options, as well as the possibility for improvements to the pedestrian streetscape on Gilbert, would all be welcome if they were to take place. However, I do have some concerns with the nature of this development. Already, the riverfront crossings area is a predominantly student and renter-occupied part of the city, but all too often seen with a lot of the new construction seen here, new construction and new developments remain too expensive for residents, including students, and seem to remain so for the foreseeable future. For this development, I hear some of these buzzwords like amenities and private bathrooms and walk-in closets, things that students might not necessarily need or even want, that ultimately only serve to drive up the cost of housing. Let's see, it was explicitly mentioned multiple stories of underground parking could also be a significant contributor to an increase in the cost of construction and by extension rents, especially in an area that is close to campus and is on Prentice and Bowery Street, areas that are outlined to become bicycle boulevards under the city's bicycle master plan. So I know that tonight we're only going over the rezoning, but in approving new construction on this lot, I ask council to be mindful of the initial costs that would be borne on new residents of this building, and to take that in mind for approving all new construction in the city going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Austin. You have what?
Austin brought up a question. I don't know if the young man, the developer, could answer this or not in relation to the parking. So many of the apartment complexes, I've been shocked in this community by the fact that it's provided as an amenity, but there's an additional cost. So obviously we've talked about the rent is going to be fairly high. Is there going to be an additional charge to park in the unit?
There will be an additional charge to park for the unit, and it will be in line with market.
Okay, thanks. Would anybody else like to address this topic? And by this topic, I mean the amending the regulating plan and considering the rezoning, though we'll discuss the rezoning later. Okay, I don't see anyone else, so I'm going to close the public hearing. Can I have a motion to give first consideration, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mem, seconded by Cole. Discussion.
Well, I'm in favor of changing the regulating plan. I think it makes sense with, the ability to kind of consolidate these two units together, these two properties together. It makes sense to have it obviously under the same regulating plan. And I think when, the original plans were done, not everything in the future could be foreseen in terms of what would be redeveloped and what would not be redeveloped. There's still obviously details with the rezoning and the site and everything, but I think the changes to the regulating plan make sense to me.
Well, just to get a little bit of conflict in the way here so that we can have a thorough discussion, I support rezoning the properties to riverfront crossings districts. I have no objection whatsoever to redevelopment of the site. I think it's a good idea. And I would greatly like to see Ralston Creek enhanced. So there are pluses that I see. But I do not support amending the regulating plan. Nor do I support the rezoning as proposed, which we'll get into in a long minute, for the south portion of the site or the height bonuses the applicant intends to apply for. I think an 8-story structure on Gilbert Street, just north of the railroad bridge, would be far out of scale with other buildings on Gilbert. And my general sense is that a single 8-story structure with parking on the first 3 floors is substantially inconsistent with the original purpose of the Riverfront Crossings District part of the comprehensive plan. So I can elaborate on these points, but they really get more deeply into the rezoning and height bonuses thing. I can see amending the regulating plan to make both of portions of the site into Riverfront Crossings District zones, but I don't think the southern part of it needs to be rezoned to, Central Crossings. I think it can remain, Gilbert Street? Is that what the name of that sub-district is? So anyhow, I could elaborate, but I'll get that point out there.
Jeff, what are we talking about in terms of a dollar figure on this total project? Do we have any sense of that?
I don't have a sense.
Okay, but it's millions of dollars.
Sure.
I'm 100% in favor of this. First, I want to address the issue that you brought up, Mayor, related to essentially forecasting of aggregate demand. I do not think that that is a function of what we're here to do in terms of our own ability to predict future aggregate demand. The whole field of macroeconomics is rife with uncertainty as to making those sorts of forecasts. I think our role is to make a consistent, predictable plan in which developers can, with certainty, make decisions as the sorts of investments that we're making. I think we place way too much weight on 1, 2, and 3 stories in this particular district. I certainly love family-friendly neighborhoods. I want family-friendly neighborhoods, but 25 years ago, we made a decision to close Sabin School. There have not been large numbers of families in this particular district. We have an opportunity for market-based solutions to address a housing need that we have. It's in close proximity to the University of Iowa. The other thing relates to price. I wish in my ideal world everything would be free and we would not have to charge what we do. New construction is extremely expensive. I don't think we're going to get any developers that are going to essentially do an investment where they're not getting a return on their investment. They do these particular plans with careful decision making. And I think, quite frankly, we do great damage when we've had this particular riverfront crossings, which, as I see it, Jim, Mayor, you were around earlier than I was, but the whole concept of the height bonus, the amenities in exchange for the height bonus, I view it as a linchpin of this particular district. And I think insofar it is a student-centered district, I think that's a good thing. It is in close proximity to the University of Iowa, and it makes a ton of sense for me to get this project moving so that we can get this particular district developed. And I do think it's important that we talk about the challenges of allowing more living opportunities in our adjacent neighborhoods to get our families closer downtown in our traditional residential neighborhoods. I think that is absolutely a good thing. But when a solution is presented to us to address this issue, we don't take it. And in terms of the affordability of it, I do believe that this sort of growth is what allows us to make these sorts of investments. I'm 100% in favor of it, and I think we need to move forward with it.
Well, I'll be supporting the change, this particular ordinance that we're discussing at the moment. I do have concerns along the lines of some of what Jim has mentioned in terms of the scale of the project. I'll reserve those to the reading of the second item, but that aspect of it is a concern to me. One of the market issues that I'm concerned with the student housing market is when I hear descriptions of projects like this one, where they're designed really exclusively for students in the sense that you have the lease is by the room, each bedroom has a bathroom, so they're really kind of locked in, it seems to me, to that segment of the market. If there should be a failure in the market, the preferred solution I would like to see is that the housing we build could adapt to a non-student population. This is less likely to do that because of it seems to me, maybe the developer could explain Plan B should there be a collapse of the student housing market, but it seems that this particular building type, with the way it's designed internally, is not as flexible as a building which could more easily adapt to a non-student population. So that's one reason I am concerned with if we should overshoot with our student housing market, what's the backup plan?
There's a huge need for one-bedroom units throughout the regular market or affordable markets for individuals. And so I do think that potentially—
Depending on how many there are of the one-bedroom.
Yeah, so I do think that the building would be used if the market should change, and it's not going to be for student housing. I think that's something the developers and other landlords would have to determine what they're going to do to get income into their building. So of course, the rents are really expensive for the student market. I don't like that one bit, but I do think that that's a choice that the developer is making, the risk that the developer is going to take. Our students can remain right where they are, wherever they're living, within the outskirts, or move to Riverfront Crossing. I am going to support the regulating plan, and the two properties making them one that, makes a lot of sense to me, especially if we're going to, the height bonus of 8 stories. I really would like to see more of a commercial space on the bottom. I think that or something that would be accessible to the community, because we're talking about making sure that people are active and staying in the community walkable. And so I would love to see that. Of course, when I hear that there's going to be a fee for parking, that just, again, kind of nickels and dime. And I think there should be some type of a regulation where I don't know how you do it, but it shouldn't all just be fee. But again, I am going to support the regulating plan right now. And rezoning it to Riverfront Crossing, that's not an issue for me.
I think what we're looking at is whether or not we agree with the changing and the zoning. And it seems appropriate to do that, but I would like to express concerns, some of which have already been mentioned. One of which I think I heard something that's a major assumption that I don't think is entirely accurate, that it's going to pull residents out of surrounding neighborhoods. And I don't think that's true, because I know that there are a lot of parents out there that are buying single-family homes for their students to live in, because they'd rather have them have that home kind of atmosphere. I live in a residential district on the west side, and there are 3 within a 2-block radius of myself, and they're great neighbors. I wouldn't even know that it's students there, except for the extra scooters and extra cars that are parked in their driveway. So that's a quite obvious sign that it's students that are living there, and they are good neighbors. But I think that that is on the rise, because that's only been in the last couple years in my neighborhood that's happened. So I think that perhaps they prefer to live away from campus rather than that close to campus, except for maybe the younger ones. So I think that that's a major assumption that we can't count on. Because I, like Jim, I am concerned that we're overshooting the demand. I hear that from a lot of people. Even my 12-year-old grandson says that, why do we keep building these apartments? And that I think is a major question, and I would question that 5% vacancy rate on that. And we talked a lot about the height, 750 versus 725, and I don't think that's really the question here. I think another big issue with this building is that it's got such a large footprint. It's one large building. I think, how did Danielle describe it, as that it stretches. It stretches along the creek, and it does indeed. Stretches refers to a very long building, and it does. It goes along the creek, and it's long. I would prefer to see maybe a distinct break in the buildings rather than one long continuous footage of building. I think that might help with the walkability of the area and even the appearance of the buildings. Because that is it's massive. It's a massive building. So that's a concern of mine. There are things that I appreciate. I appreciate the fact that you're willing to look at the creek, but I would think as a good steward of that property, that would just be part of, we shouldn't have to give you credit for that. I think that should be part of something that you should do anyway, if that's neighboring your property, that you should take care of that, help us take care of that creek. Let's see, what else do I have to say? Another statement was that questioned the compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood, and it said multi-story residential buildings to the northeast are 3 to 5 stories, and that this is compatible with that. But that's 8 stories. We're talking 3 more stories in addition. So I don't think that's comparable to 3 to 5 stories. I disagree with the fact that it says they're not much taller than the surrounding buildings, only because it goes down into the valley. They're still a tall, massive building. I think that's all I have to say.
Any other comments?
I'm not really objecting the regulation of the plan amendment at all. I'm concerned. Yes, I have a concern about, I don't know, this is going to come on the rezoning, because as I know, this is only just the regulating of the plan amendment. I'm going to support that, but I'm really concerning about making this 8-story building, just having this area to be very dominant students' housing, and the way that even the student housing being built and furnished and rent by room and charge for parking and make extra, all these kind of things is really concerning me. But for now, just for the amendment, I'm for it.
Okay, I want to mention one other thing briefly, and then we can move on. We adopted our riverfront crossings plan in 2013. Susan and I were on the council then. So when we adopted that plan, I understood that we were seeking to build a diverse, mixed-use, walkable neighborhood. That's what I understand that plan to be all about. And I don't think this proposed project will contribute to a diverse, mixed-use neighborhood. And I worry about its effects on sort of the walkability, even though I really like the Ralston Creek part of the project. Okay, so I think we could go ahead and vote. I think people have expressed their views. So Without objection, roll call, please.
Mims?
Yes.
Salee?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
No?
Cole?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1. Moving on to item 10B, rezoning at 305 and 315 East Prentice Street and 625 South Gilbert Street. This is an ordinance conditionally rezoning approximately 1.6 acres of land located at 305 and 315 East Prentice Street and 625 South Gilbert Street from intensive commercial CI1 and community commercial CC2 to Riverfront Crossings, Central Crossings. I'll open the public hearing. Danielle?
Thank you, Mayor. As promised, this is the rezoning that follows the change to the zoning code. Shown here in blue is the next step. Again, we did review based on those criteria that I presented earlier. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of this application with 4 conditions. Let me walk you through those conditions. The first relates to dedication of right-of-way along the west side of South Gilbert Street. That's to accommodate improvements to the pedestrian connection sidewalks. Second, provision of an access easement for city wastewater division vehicles to access a manhole for a trunk sewer already located on the southwest corner of the property. Third, an access for a sanitary sewer line, again for city access to the property for that utility. 4, improvements specific to Ralston Creek, including removal of invasive trees, a stream bank stabilization, planting of trees, dedication of a temporary construction easement, and then all of that to occur in a certain time frame. And finally, the execution of an affordable housing agreement. Again, that's somewhat redundant since our code does require affordable housing, but in the Riverfront Crossings District, it is something we put in there explicitly to draw attention to it. So those are the 4 conditions that are attached to this. We had prepared a conditional zoning agreement, but it has not yet been signed. Staff is continuing to work with the applicant on their concerns with the CZA.
I'm a little confused. Is there going to be a public trail adjacent to Ralston Creek? Is that something that's going to be done?
That is what they're requesting for their bonus height consideration, but that is a detail to be worked out. The specifics of looking at their concept plan, that's what we anticipate them proposing, but that's just their concept at this point.
Okay.
Any further questions for Danielle?
Just one clarification for us and for the public. Voting, one, we're not going to vote tonight, correct? Because there's not a CZA signed. But the rezoning, the approval of the bonus heights will be separate from the rezoning.
Right. The rezoning would just establish the zoning district and then set the rules for how many stories of base height would be allowed by right, and then what threshold would be required to go through what level of design review.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Danielle?
No, if I can add, Mayor, I appreciate the applicant's forwardness with their bonus height intentions. And while you're not going to take that up with this rezoning, I would certainly encourage the council in your future discussions during the rezoning to try to be as clear as you can on your expectations for bonus height. As you know, if the rezoning proceeds, they would have 4 stories by right. Staff can approve an additional 2 stories. If they propose a 7 or 8 story building, though, it will come back to you, and that is a subjective review. So while we have criteria, you'll need to clearly articulate what your expectations are for that, and that's going to help the applicant and their team not only save a lot of time, but save a lot of money as well. So kind of keep that in mind. You went through that a little bit with 12 East Court, where you had to think of the rezoning in terms of your vote, but you also had to kind of project your expectations for a future bonus height application. I just encourage you to be thinking about that for the future readings of this rezoning.
Would anybody else like to address this topic? Austin.
Hello there again. I would like to open up this set of comments with A quote from Thomas Carl Reddick. He's someone from a campus architectural firm who's quoted in The Atlantic on an article about college student housing. He's quoted as saying in the article, "If you can get the costs down, students will live in a closet." I find this line to be largely true. That when students are looking for housing, they're not necessarily looking for a living experience or amenities or bells and whistles and tricks and gadgets. What they're looking for is they're looking for somewhere safe, somewhere affordable, somewhere convenient, and that they're first and foremost looking for simply a space to put all their stuff in, space where they can sleep at night safe and sound. To that end, I don't think that this particular rezoning is bad. I welcome the potential for increased housing supply, but we should be cognizant that increased housing supply does not necessarily translate to affordability. And the concept of new buildings aging into affordability over time does not happen at a realistic time scale for people right now. I am concerned about some of the specifics outlined tonight in this development that will follow the rezoning. That like some of the other developments that have taken place around the city that are student-centric, they place too much emphasis on amenities or luxuries or other accessory pieces at the expense of affordability, and that it is actually, that contrary to the claims presented by developers, it is actually not affordable to most students. So I just ask that the council take that into account, not for the rezoning, but more so when additional proposals come down the line. Thanks.
Thank you, Austin. Good evening.
Good evening. Hi, my name's Rachel Schaefer, and I have been a student here at Iowa for 5 years now, going into my 5th year. I was an undergrad student, and now I am a master's student in urban and regional planning. Going off of what you've brought up and others here, I just wanted to talk about the fact that there are not just undergrads here that we're here to serve with student housing. There's also the graduate population. I'm currently on a student stipend, which is less than $1,000 a month, and places like these aren't even on my radar when it comes to searching for housing. I'm way over off of Keokuk Street across the highway. So I guess when it comes to thinking about your master's and your PhD students who are on a very tight budget and are a big part of our population here in Iowa City, just to consider that and our use of that space. It isn't useful. It will not be on my radar in the future, and I'm sure other graduate students can attest to that. So building that building won't be useful to me and my peers, so thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Clarissa Dietz.
Could you say your name again, please?
Clarissa Dietz.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in, and ooh, the room is spinning. Give me a second. I stood up really fast. I would like to recommend that the city looks at tying electrification into all requests for rezoning and other favors. Climate change is a huge, urgent issue, and the more buildings we can electrify, the better we will be moving forward. So we won't have to backtrack and remake buildings that we could have just made right in the first place. And I would also like to recommend that the city revise its energy and environmental design provision in the Riverfront Crossings District. Right now the language is kind of vague, and when developers say, you know, we're going to think about energy efficiency, there's not a clear standard for what that means. So they can make a lot of promises and not technically break them, but still not do a whole lot for the city's carbon footprint. So, thank you.
Thank you, Clara. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one else, we cannot close the public hearing. Can we have preliminary discussion? Can we consider what-
You can have a preliminary discussion. Ultimately, you're going to have to continue the public hearing and defer first consideration to October 15th.
Yeah. Okay. So it'd be best to speak in terms of inclination, I suppose, instead of definitive statements about these things. So since the council has approved the amending, or is in the process of approving amendment to the regulating plan, it would only make sense to rezone both parts to central crossings. So I'm not going to oppose the rezoning itself. But there's various things I don't favor, and I want to draw attention to my thinking right now about height bonuses. I think Clara was spot on. For well over a year, I've tried to get us to consider revisions to the height bonus provisions and what justifies height bonuses in the Riverfront Crossings District. It's on our pending work session list. We haven't been able to get to it, and that's on us. I'm not blaming anybody for that. But I think we need to do that. So I do not favor the idea of enabling the applicant, the developer, to build one large building. I think that's inconsistent with the overall intentions of the Riverfront Crossings Plan. I think a 4-story bonus is untimely and unnecessary. And I think the lead request, as stated in the material we've seen so far, is inadequate. Instead, I think the bonus should be limited to 2 stories, not 4, but 2. And if any bonus is approved, even for 2 stories, which would only require staff review and approval, the bonus should help us achieve our climate action goals. I'll be damned if I'll vote for this if we don't expect the developer to help us achieve our climate action goals with regard to reducing carbon emissions. So what we have in our code right now is woefully inadequate concerning lead and environmental stuff. So if we get to the point where we agree that we'd only approve a 2-story bonus, I would say we should direct the staff to ensure that the bonus goes for helping us achieve our climate action goal. If it's 4 stories, if that's what the majority does, again, emphasis has to be placed on that. So what do the rest of you think?
Well, I'll speak partly because I can build on your comments. You know, I did look at, in some detail, the Riverfront Crossings plan and what the vision and development character that was anticipated there. And, you know, staff made a reference to the moderate scale for this particular area. The moderate scale, basically, based on my reading of the building height diagram, essentially translates to buildings 4 to 6 stories in height. And what I find interesting is this is one district in Riverfront Crossings where there's been a fair share of development. So you see along Dubuque Street a number of buildings from the parking ramp south, and then there's some development on Prentice that's under construction. All of that is pretty consistent with the Riverfront Crossings plan. It's in the 3 to 5 story building height range. And so we have some evidence on the ground that we can, you know, you can walk around the district and get a sense of the feel of that streetscape character that is referred to in the plan. How friendly is it? Is it a pleasant experience? And my observation, having walked it over the last week or so, is that it has been successful. It seems to me the scale and the intent of the Riverfront Crossings plan has been achieved to the degree it's been redeveloped. So my inclination, based on that experience and the vision of the plan, is to support a 4 to 6 story building with this project. Partly because I would need much deeper, articulation of what exactly is going to be built if it's 8 stories, than what we saw in this submittal for me to feel comfortable with anything over 6 stories. I think particularly since the length of the building faces Ralston Creek, I'd really like to get a better idea of what that relationship is in terms of building height to that creek corridor. The buildings that are under construction or on the west side of the creek are 4 stories. Some sense of symmetry with respect to the building heights on both sides of the creek, I think, is something to consider. And as we've seen in other proposals recently, that could possibly be developed through step backs and other means if one were to consider it. But I agree with Jim in that the focus, if we're going to be talking about the bonus heights, the focus should be on making the building as energy efficient as possible. That's, I think, probably our greatest priority as a city now with new development, is to bring it into alignment with our climate response. And then again, secondarily, the vision of the plan was to create sub-districts with different qualities and characters. And, this is one district where there seems to be some foundation for that I think has been successful. So I would need to be convinced that anything beyond that 6-story height limit would be appropriate in that location.
I want to elaborate a little bit on what Jim talked about and Clara very clearly talked about as far as reducing our carbon emissions. Going to go just a little bit different road as far as it really concerns me that it's going to provide 259 residential parking spaces. That's a lot of automobiles and a lot of carbon emissions. That's ridiculous, and it only is that many because they're proposing the 178 dwelling units, which comes from the 8 stories. So I think in one respect, perhaps we have to revisit our off-street parking requirements, or most importantly, reduce the height of this building so there aren't as many units and wouldn't require 259 parking spaces.
Well, I guess since we seem to be following up on each other, to follow up on that, if you make the assumption, and I think I heard the developer say 400 beds approximately, if you assume that those, and they're renting by the bedroom, if you assume that those 400 people are going to live somewhere in this community, and the same proportion of them are going to have cars, whether they live in this building or anywhere else in the community, you're not adding any cars to the community. You're just moving the cars around. And in fact, if you get students closer to the campus, you may have fewer students that feel a need to have a car because they're easily on the bus line, easily bikeable, easily walkable to the university campus. So the developer is putting in the 259 parking spaces because of our regulations. And I agree with you, Pauline, that that's something we've talked about potentially revisiting. But I do disagree with you from the standpoint that by building this, we're adding cars to the community. All we're doing is moving the people around depending on where people are going to live. And again, as I said earlier, I think the closer we can get students to campus, the more likely we are to have students who feel that they don't actually need a car, or at least use it less. Number one, if you're a student, you know that it's virtually impossible to park on the university campus during the daytime. So you're parking on surrounding residential streets. Well, if you're this close, you're probably not going to try and drive any closer to campus than you already are. Like I say, you're going to hop on your bike, you're going to walk, you're going to grab the bus. I think one of the things that's really important in looking at the bonus height on this is the context of the site. And for me, looking at this right down by Ralston Creek and looking at that diagram that is in our packet on, what page was it, 184, I think that, so when we talk about like 8 stories on this one versus, I don't know if it's 3 or 4 stories or 5 stories for the 620 Dubuque Street building, that doesn't resonate with me because this is sitting at the bottom of that hill, and if you've ever driven Prentice, you know how steep that hill is between South Gilbert and Dubuque Street. And so when you're siting this building down at the bottom, in the lowest part of that valley, then to go up 8 stories is not like you're starting at the top of the hill on Dubuque Street and going up 8 stories. So for me, I don't see it as being, I don't see that as being problematic when you look at it relative to the surrounding buildings, with it being sited at the very bottom. There have been a lot of comments, and Rockne, I'll give you credit for a number of things that you comment on. You know, we can't predict aggregate demand. We can't, and that's not relevant for us. It is up to the developers to decide if they are going to take that risk in terms of developing within our community. In general, I would agree that this is not an area that we're going to see a lot of families. There's not a school real close to there. I actually applaud the developer, and more student housing developers are doing this in terms of renting by the bedroom. I mean, I remember for I don't know how many years that my 4 kids went through college. They were all 2 years apart, 10 or 12 years. Let me tell you, I had my fingers crossed that no roommate moved out in the middle of the year, because I knew what my liability was, or my daughter or my son's liability was, if they had a roommate move out and default on their lease. We had to pick up that difference, because those apartments back in those days were not rented by the bedroom. You rented as one of 3 or 4 roommates, and you were all liable for the entire amount of that lease. And so I think this is a change that is actually a very positive change for students. They're only liable for their own bedroom. Makes a huge difference to those individuals and to those families. I like the fact that more developers of student housing are providing fully furnished units. You talk about carbon emissions. Obviously, there's a lot of other issues. But think about what that does in terms of move in and move out every July 31st, August 1st. It is students coming with 1 car probably and their suitcases and bringing in, you know, all those personal items. They're not having to move in and out furnitures. Think about what that does for our landfill. Think about what that does for rummage in the ramp. I mean, all of a sudden you are starting to have thousands upon thousands of units now that are not being changed out with all those furnishings every summer. And so I think those are important things as well. I do believe that as we see more development close to the university, I don't think there's any way that we can't be pulling some students out of the close-in neighborhoods. I hope that eventually we start seeing families come into some of those single-family homes, like in the north side, et cetera. But if the university doesn't grow a lot in terms of their student population, and buildings like the Rise and this building and Augusta Place, et cetera, fill up, where do you think those students are coming from? They're coming from the outlying neighborhoods. And so that is going to free those up. So I'm not saying this is a perfect development. I will make one other comment. People have commented about the size of the building and the length of the building. I think, and obviously we're going to want to see more details in terms of not just the footprint, but renderings, et cetera. But I think the terraces that they have facing Ralston Creek, and the fact that one whole side of this is along an alley, really mitigates the length of the building in terms of, there's not really anywhere that the, quote, general public is going to see the mass or the length of this building because of the location. So I think there's a lot of positives here. I understand and am not in disagreement with people who want to see more efforts towards our climate goals in terms of the 8 stories. But in general, I would say that I'm very supportive of the project and of the 4 bonus stories.
I'm inclined to support this. We've had a lot of discussions about climate change. As far as I can tell, the greatest thing that we can do for climate change is population density. If you look at carbon emission per person, New York City is one of the greenest cities in the United States. If you want to talk about some of the most environmentally detrimental areas of the United States, they're in the bluest, and by the way, I love rural areas, so this isn't against rural, I love farmers, love you. But if you're talking about residential development in the outlying areas, that is some of the worst impacts in terms of climate change. So as far as I can tell, if we're talking, I would commend you to Triumph of the City by Edward Glaser, talks about this precise phenomena. There's another book called Green City that is also very important, because I think we can all have a lot of opinions, but we need to have data. And the data tells us that the greenest places are Chicago, New York, Iowa City. If you would do a carbon emission map, the density is going to mean good for the environment. As to this discussion of height, I don't think the issue is 4, 6, or 8. I think the issue is 2. And that is to say, if we are in agreement that 6 is okay, are we really willing to compromise this sort of investment for 2 stories? I do not think that an additional 2 stories is going to transform a 6-story building, and an 8-story is going to cause a deleterious impact on adjacent neighborhoods. I just don't think that that's true. The third thing is relating to riverfront crossings. This plan that we have is the Cadillac of urban plans that we have in this city. Our margin of error in this particular district is significant, and that is because of all of the hours that community members put into play, city council put into play, our staff put into play in terms of making this the premier urban plan that we have in our community. And, in terms of this height issue, the bonus provisions in terms of implementing the riverfronts crossings plan came almost immediately after the riverfront crossings plan. So to say that this was something that wasn't foreseen or not intended, I cannot reconcile that. And I think our view, as I see it, is not to substitute our view for the vision of the people that actually passed it, the community members that went to town halls, the staff that put in all that time, the people that did these studies. The only thing that I want, and I'd really like to get for our conditional zoning agreement, is a trail along the Ralston Creek. I think that in terms of bikeability, walkability, this is going to be a very dynamic district, and the greener that we can make it, the more pedestrian-friendly we can make it, the better. In terms of parking, I have a somewhat different view. I think that this notion that we have free parking or that we got to have low-cost parking, I think is wrong. I think if you're talking about carbon emissions, what is the big problem with carbon emissions? It's free parking. That is, that every single thing you do is designed for free parking. So I think, frankly, the fact that parking is more of a scarce commodity and people have to pay for it, I think it is a good thing. And I also think that it starts us looking for alternative transportation options. So I am in support of this. Now, if we were talking about downtown and heights, I would share in complete views of some of my colleagues. But here, I think it's a major mistake to slow down projects like this. We need to get this sort of development. And I think, we are a university town. I don't think there's anything wrong, and we should not apologize for having a student-friendly district. For the students that want to live in our neighborhoods, you are welcome. We love you too. We want you in the neighborhoods. But for the students that want a more student-friendly environment where they can do what students do, I think that's a good thing too. So I am inclined to support this, and I think this is a project that we need to get moving at 8 stories.
I'd like to clarify one point, not to disagree with anything you said, but you referred to if we can agree that 6 stories is a reasonable height, then why have a big tussle over another 2 stories? Yeah. So what I want to be clear about is that the Riverfront Crossing Central Crossing Subdistrict has a maximum base height of 4 floors and a maximum height bonus of 4 more floors. Mm-hmm. So we're starting at 4, okay? Not 6. Not at 6. That's all. Anybody else have any comments?
I mean, you all have said a lot, and so what I would love is for the day when some of the things that we're talking about that we would love to see is for developers to come, offering that from the beginning. Climate control, climate action from the beginning, where that's something that we're not even asking for. Affordable, rents for those individuals that kind of want to live in a student environment that is affordable. Rockne, you're talking about low-cost parking, or fee for parking. It will, definitely decrease or have people thinking about should they buy a car or where should they park their car and stuff like that. But again, that is at the developer that gets that money, and so yes, it is a deterrent from the use of vehicles, and the height bonuses. Again, I believe that we need to have that conversation and talk about what is by right, because us talking about the height bonuses, I do think that it's a tool that we're using right now. And I hope that we get some things that, there's been a few things mentioned about what would really be a public benefit with that height bonus. And so for me, I think overall, there's a lot of good things about this project. Definitely, I get what Susan's talking about. When a roommate moves out and the cost burden it can put on families, that's definitely a positive. I am not too concerned overall about the market. I think the market will, at some point, determine what it'll do itself. If this building and other buildings are successful, I believe ultimately, as we go down the road, and I think Austin talked about it, immediately, the cost will be kind of high is down the road, where costs may shift, where if we have a high vacancy, we'll see within the Riverfront Crossing and even other parts of Iowa City, where those rents will become more affordable potentially if the market doesn't stand as people anticipated. So yeah, I just long for the day when people will come and developers, which I totally welcome development, and developers to our city to come and help us with our needs, because we need developers to help us meet some of our goals here in our city for our residents. And so I just hope that you've heard us tonight and look forward to future things with your rezoning.
Okay. I just want to talk about, if we want to talk about the carbon emission and all this, and I'm 100% for reducing the carbon emission and everything. And also I just recommend, or I can be supporting for anything that we as a council requested from the developer, so he can help us achieve our climate action plan, no doubt. But height, I don't mind height. I can go up to 80 story. But where? In Riverfront Crossing? Okay, no problem. But my main concern will be affordable housing there. My concern, because Riverfront Crossing, by the law, you have to have 10% affordable. And as I give you example earlier, affordable to who? And how much, when we say affordable, how much is it? My experience by just go to the rise and see how much the affordable and non-affordable, because I guess it's 80% of the below, right? It have to be affordable, and 80% of below of the area median income.
The rise was at 80%,
Or
but that was
below.
before the inclusionary zoning ordinance was passed. The inclusionary zoning ordinance requires below 60%.
Okay, even 60%. I really think this is 60% out of the furnished, that expensive with the own bathroom. It's really expensive. And I don't know if it's going to be affordable to who. I can agree to a height for like 80 story, no problem, if the developer provide really excellent affordable housing plan, or pay fee in lieu, for those, so we can build somewhere else, use it somewhere else to build like affordable housing that's affordable forever, not 10 years. That's what I'm gonna be really for. If that, I'm not, height, it's okay with me, but I have to get something on exchange. That's all.
Okay, I think we've all had a chance to speak, haven't we? And get a sense of what we're all thinking. So I need a motion to continue the public hearing and defer first consideration to October the 15th.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mims, seconded by Cole. Discussion?
No?
Okay, hearing none, roll call, please.
It's
Oh, it's all
just a
in-
voice vote.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Thank you. So we'll move on to item 11. Item 11, bike and electric device fines. This is an ordinance amending Title III entitled Finances, Taxation, and Fees, and Title IX entitled Motor Vehicles and Traffic to provide uniform fines for bicycle and electric device code violations. This is second consideration, but staff has requested expedited action.
I move that the rule requiring that ordinances must be considered and voted on for passage at 2 council meetings prior to the meeting at which it is to be finally passed be suspended, that the second consideration and vote be waived, and that the ordinance be voted on for final passage at this time.
Second.
Moved by Mims, seconded by Saleh. Discussion. Hearing none, roll call, please.
Saleh?
Whoop.
Yes?
Does anybody in the room want to talk on this? No, apparently not. Okay.
I think so.
Oh.
Did you want to speak?
Yeah.
Sorry, my bad, again. State your name again, please.
Hi, Christian. I just wanted to bring up one question. Somebody asked last time about the legal fees associated with it, and somebody was going to look into those.
Yeah, there's a memo in the packet.
Okay.
and
I might have missed that.
I think the amount was.
About $80 total, I
yeah,
think.
About $80 total, and we don't have any control over that.
Okay, I don't see anybody else, so we'll see now. We're ready to do roll call, right? Roll call, please.
Saleh?
Yes?
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes?
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Move final adoption.
Second.
Moved by Mims, seconded by Thomas. Discussion.
The only thing I want to say related to this topic is that I am noticing a lot of electric skateboards and scooters downtown, so I think this is a really timely issue. And I think in terms of enforcement and education to the public, I'm seeing a lot of people really zooming in the public, so I think education is going to be very huge because I'm really concerned about a collision.
Any further discussion?
Oh.
Hearing none, roll call, please.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes?
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Saleh?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Item 12, purchase of 2129 Taylor Drive. This is a resolution approving a purchase agreement for a duplex property located at 2129 Taylor Drive for the South District Home Investment Partnership Program. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
Move.
Second.
Moved by Solis, seconded by Cole. Sorry, yeah. Hey, Erica, hi.
Hi, Erica Kubley with Neighborhood Services. The city is proposing to purchase 2129 Taylor for the South District Home Investment Partnership Program. The duplex is located on Taylor Drive between Tracy Lane and Sandusky Drive. Each unit has 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom with additional space in the basement and a walkout basement. The property was owner occupied, where the owner lived in 1 unit and rented out the other unit. However, the rental unit has been vacant for several months. The purchase price for the entire duplex will be about $130,000. For each unit, we have $35,000 in local funds plus $25,000 in federal home funds for renovations and down payment assistance for the buyers. Prior to property acquisition, we don't typically have a full scope of work developed for the renovations, so I included the Housing Rehab Energy Efficiency and Sustainability Guide in your packet to show you elements that we may incorporate into the project depending on the scope of work and the budget availability. We use these guidelines for all of our housing rehab projects, including University, GRIP, owner-occupied rehab, and we'll use it for our new rental rehab program. We don't necessarily do every single item on the list, but based on the budget and the scope of work, we try to incorporate them. Other updates about the program: the other duplex that we purchased on Sandusky is under renovation. It will be about another month or 2 before we complete that, and it's ready for a buyer. The home buyer application is now live on the website for interested buyers. We recently mailed a letter to all the renters within the South District project area, notifying them about the homeownership opportunity. And then we're also working with Horizons for homebuyer education. So one of our next steps is to try and coordinate a homeownership informational session, hopefully with Horizons and the neighborhood residents, so that people can attend and get more information to determine if buying a home is right for them. That's all I have.
Great, thanks. Any questions for Erica?
I just want to ask you, the order that you have the home buyer guide lay, especially for a preference for purchasing unit shall be A, B, C, D, is that in order? Or like, if you find somebody who really live there, you're going to give them priority to buy it? I know this duplex is empty, but just like that's for example, because you said existing or former tenant.
Right, so the previous property, property we purchased on Sandusky, there was a tenant who lived there before the fire, so we wanted to give priority to that person if they wanted to move back to the neighborhood.
They already outside in the neighborhood?
Yeah, they were displaced with the fire prior to.
Because, they displaced. It's not their own choice. Okay.
Yes, yep.
I thought if it's their own choice, why we should do that? But if they've been displaced, that's good. And after that, if you don't find this person or he said no, you're going to go to the second one. Like they have to be living in Taylor.
Yes.
If
Yep.
not.
Current residents of Taylor and Davis.
You will open it to the South District.
Yep.
Yeah, and also, number 5. I really want to ask you a question. How will this home, buying opportunity will be marketed to the resident on Taylor and Davis Street? Yes, if you can tell me what you have in mind to how you're going to market this.
So as I mentioned, we already did a mailing to the whole project area, not just Taylor and Davis. We sent it to everyone at the same time. I think we'll have staff do some door-to-door speaking with residents. One of our staff members mentioned he would do that. And then we'll also try to work with the neighborhood association and see if they can be a resource for us.
Yeah, because, I really want to tell you that if I receive a mail telling me there is home that, from the city, this home, you can buy this home, without even going to the details and everything, I will just think that if I cannot buy it, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna think that really I can buy that house because trying to buy, maybe I cannot. I know my situation, but here is differently. We have a system. Are you highlighting all this to the people you're sending out? You tell them we have 35,000, 25,000. We can assist you. We can teach you. We can do all this. Are you really highlighting that on the letters or no?
Yeah. So what we highlighted were the education opportunities for homeownership, the rehab funds that we're using to renovate the unit, and then the down payment assistance, and then kind of just our contact information about how to get in touch with city staff.
Yeah. And I really like the idea that city staff can go there and tell the people, because this will make the people say, oh, is this real? And they will trust that they will do whatever they can so they can be a homeowner or whatever. And the 130 is for the duplex, the both of them together, or each one is 130, like 130, the price?
Both of them together. So
Both of them together.
the purchase price for the buyer will be half of that plus carrying costs.
Okay, will be around 50, 65?
Yeah.
Right? 65. And I really think 65 is really reasonable.
Yep, and that's before any down payment assistance, too.
Yes, even that before the down. That's why I really encourage you to go there so you can tell people. You can find a lot of people interested in this. Thank you for all this good work.
Any other questions for Erica? Guess not. Thank you. Does anybody else want to address this topic? Okay, seeing no one else, discussion among council members?
I was very excited and supportive of this project when it was first presented to us. I thought it sounded like a really great idea for that neighborhood. And then I was disappointed at first when it looked like there were not going to be any properties available. But now this is the second one, so it's very exciting. And I just wish it the best of success in finding potential owners and redeveloping and finding even more.
Yes.
So this was my entry into council when this was proposed. And of course, I didn't understand how all this worked. And today, this is something that I'm very proud of, to see that an idea that came from the community, came from staff, is here in operation and happening. And of course, like you said, we thought for a minute there it wasn't going to take place. And we were even thinking, what do we do now? And then staff persistence have found a way to make this happen. And so thanks to staff for listening to the community and for even coming up with some of the ideas of how this program can work. This is awesome and amazing, and I'm very excited about it.
What do you really think, Bruce? I also want to give a big shout out to Royce Ann Porter, Supervisor Royce Ann Porter, as well as the residents themselves. I think this really provides the best illustration of collaborative governance with our residents, with our staff, with our other government entities, where the first sort of proposal that we had wasn't quite right. It had a lot of good intention, but I think the proposal that we have now, I think, reflects our values, it reflects the neighborhood's values, and I think we really got it right. So I'm really hoping we can use this as a template to expand future home ownership opportunities throughout the community. So let's get started. So.
Yeah, this is really exciting. And to your point, Bruce, I remember this very well. In the day of the election,
yes,
you are in there celebrating that you won. We voted this down. I remember this. And after that, council come together, like member of the community reach out, and thank you for Royce Ann Porter and her group. We come out, and now I just see this like being approved now, and all the council put their ideas and how we can make this really working, and the cooperation that all of us come together after we start sitting down and discuss, with the help, of course, of the of the staff. Thank you so much. You've done a lot good job in this. I really appreciate it. I'm very excited about this project because really I thought this is not going to happen, but finally it does. Thank you for everyone who really being involved in this.
Any other discussion? I just support everything everybody said. So bravo, bravo.
Bravo.
Okay,
Bravo.
roll call, please.
Teague?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Salee?
Yes.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Item 13, establish Climate Action Commission. This is a resolution establishing a Climate Action Commission. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mims, seconded by Teague.
Get a second.
Discussion. Would anybody in the audience like to say anything about this? Okay, how about council discussion?
Well, it's really nice to see this move forward. It's a big, it's a big step in terms of our response to climate action. So looking forward to approving this and moving forward.
Yeah, it's a good major step, and in a few minutes, we will be appointing 6 active advisory board members to this commission. So,
Yeah, it's a true day to celebrate because, climate action it's protests, getting the word out, but it's also the day-to-day management of trying to get the carbon emission reductions to work in practice. So I think this is going to be a fantastic board. I'm really excited about that, and we're looking forward to see what we have in store for it.
I know it's coming up in a couple items yet with the appointments, but I was glad to see that active members were going to seek reappointment to this. That'll be great.
okay, no further discussion? Roll call, please.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes?
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Salee?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Item 14, assessment schedule, appeal for 1220 Louise Street. This is a resolution adopting an assessment schedule of unpaid mowing, cleanup of property, snow removal, sidewalk repair, and stop box repair charges, and directing the clerk to certify the same to the Johnson County Treasurer for collection in the same manner as property taxes. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Thomas, seconded by Cole. Discussion. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to address this?
We did get a letter that was in the late handouts.
Yeah. I
From
did
the
not have,
homeowner.
I did not have time to read the letter, so.
He did indicate in the letter that he wouldn't be able to be here tonight.
Okay, any council discussion? My recollection from, I guess, a previous version, a handwritten version of it, that the individual was saying he doesn't have any objection to paying a fine, but he wants us to be cleaning up the street, getting the snow off the street.
That's correct.
I think he objected to paying the fine on the grounds that we hadn't cleaned up the street.
Right, so,
So he was asking if we would waive the fine since
Yeah.
we didn't do our end
I
of
think,
the.
I think we can't do that. My street doesn't get
You're-
the
you're
snow
s-
off of it
You're
immediately
setting quite a
either, so.
precedent if you do that.
Yeah. Okay, any discussion at all about this?
I do think at some point we need to just talk about snow removal and some of those things as on a future agenda item. But that,
Been there, done that, Bruce.
but this isn't,
Not this, yeah.
no, this doesn't relate to that.
You'll get a solid chance to do that in another month and a half or two.
Yeah, probably when you're gone, right?
That's before.
You'll get a chance before then. Council had requested before the winter season, this coming winter season, that staff review with you our snow removal practices and our snow removal policies, particularly focused on sidewalks and intersections downtown. So we're close to presenting that in an information packet, and I suspect you'll want to look at that and offer any thoughts
Sure, yeah. I
to
see.
us before winter hits here in a few more months.
Very
Okay,
good.
Good deal. Hearing no further discussion, roll call, please.
Throgmorton?
Yes?
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Salee?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes,
Thomas?
Motion carries 7-0. Could I have a motion to accept correspondence, please?
so move.
Second?
Moved by Teague, seconded by Soy. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 15, council appointments. Applicants must reside in Iowa City and be 18 years of age unless specific qualifications are stated. Item 15A, we have, it concerns the Board of Adjustment. We have one vacancy to fill an unexpired term effective upon appointment. We have one applicant for that position. His name's Gene Crescilas. And Gene served a 5-year term ending on December the 31st of last year. So,
I think
he's
we
still
should
eligible, is he not? I mean, because he's been off the commission for 9 months?
I can't remember how that resolution reads.
I think we could, but I think our intent has been to try to give new people an opportunity. When we've had somebody who's served a long period of time, we've typically have kind of tried to wait and see if we could get some other applicants to give other people an opportunity. So I would suggest that we not appoint tonight. I don't know if that means that we need to do another advertising for this or not, but my concern is that we end up, particularly on some of these that are, if you will, not as popular commissions, that we end up getting the same people serving over and over because other people just aren't as aware of them, really don't know what they are involved with. And I think we need to make that effort with all of our commissions to kind of rotate different community members in.
So if we re-advertised, the advertisement would go out when?
I mean, technically, when we start counting days, it's from when council announces, but it'd probably get in the paper by Monday at the latest, Monday, Tuesday.
And typically, there's how much time
Normally, you
provided?
give 30 days.
30 days? Okay,
With
so,
a new,
all right, so we'd have, was it 6 weeks or something like that?
could probably put it back on for appointment November 4th if there's applications.
All right, so would you all prefer to defer action on this and to re-advertise and consider the applications at the appropriate meeting?
Not for too long, though. I mean, I'd like to fill it.
Yeah, we don't want the Board of Adjustment to be a 4-person Board of Adjustment, because
So we could reconsider him if we don't get any other applicants? Because he really only served the one term, which it's been a year since that term was over, so I would
How
certainly.
long are the terms on there?
5.
Oh, they are
5, so
five-year
it's
terms?
just
Okay.
one term, so.
And we've been giving people, even after, I guess being senior, when we get more applicant, you give that person another term. Why we just go ahead and get and
Done
approve
that
this?
a few times, for sure. So
We
No,
done
no,
it
it
few ti-
depends.
If we do it for as the applicant, we should do it for this one. He already put his application, and we should do it.
And I think our policy does not prohibit one reappointment or, a second term.
Right.
So we do have a choice. So we could do what Susan has suggested and which I just repeated, or do what you're advocating, Maz. So how many favor what Maz has just advocated?
Well, if it's only one term that he served, then I think, we've talked about not serving more than 2 consecutive. If
Yes.
it's only the one, then I think we could appoint him now.
All right, there are 2 people, so
3,
great.
I'll support him.
4.
4, that's it.
And I think, to Susan's point, we have tried to get new, people on these boards and commissions, and I agree with that system. I think right now, what Maz is saying is, we've done it in the past. I'll go ahead and support this guy, but
We done it, especially for Human Rights Commission. We have a lot of new applicants, a lot of people interesting, and you guys chosen to appoint another person for re-election. Then, if we can do that for one person, we can do it for the rest.
Yeah, so I'll support it. I would have wished there had been more applicants, and we don't want to just choose an applicant. We want someone that is, that definitely seems interested and has the ability to be on whatever they're applying for. But I'll go ahead and support this.
Okay, so it's clear there's a majority preferring to do that. So could I have a motion to appoint Jean Cristiulas to the Board of Adjustment effective immediately upon appointment? Yeah.
Okay, move.
Second.
Moved by Slay, seconded by Teague. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 15B, Climate Action Commission. There are 6 vacancies, so to be considered, we're going to, the motion is to appoint 6 active Climate Action Advisory Board members in accord with the resolution establishing the Climate Action Commission, item 13,
Can I ask, I'm sorry,
to the following terms. So 3 would be appointed for 2 years with terms ending at the end of 2021, and 3 would be appointed for 1-year terms ending 2020, the end of 2020. And the latter set of 3 members may be appointed, well, no, the latter group of 3 members could be appointed for 2 additional 3-year terms, according to this. And the terms take effect immediately. Sorry, so.
no, I didn't mean to interrupt you, I'm sorry. I didn't find that in my packet anywhere. And I've gone back online.
It's just on the agenda, because it's current members that are interested.
Yeah, it's at the front.
Okay. Okay.
And it's
My understanding is, I think Brenda's going to have the appointed positions fill out applications so that we have
a
the
record.
demographics for the 3 other positions that will be coming up.
So I want to clarify, I'm sorry, were you finished?
No, I just don't always go to the end of that. I'm just clicking through on each of the things, so I didn't see it, that's why. Okay, thank you.
Any clarification on one point? I just read this sentence. These 3 members may be appointed for 2 additional 3-year terms. So that would be the 3 members who would be appointed for a 1-year term initially.
Correct.
Is that the intent, right?
Yes, because they.
And there's no objection to that, right? Because that's equivalent to being able to serve no more than 2 consecutive terms. But, yeah.
But this makes sense because they serve in 1 year in the beginning, right? Correct. Yeah, and they should have entitled to the whole term, right?
Right. So there are, having these members being appointed and having them had the experience of being on the initial steering committee, they may opt for a one-year term, or they may choose to reapply and be reappointed for one or more terms.
And then somebody started to ask as far as the three others, because didn't we propose 9 members?
You're going to advertise.
We'll advertise for that, right.
applications.
Just a second.
Oh, that's right. Climate Action Committee, very good, thank you.
I want to name the individuals because we typically do name people who are being appointed. So the active members seeking appointment and who would be appointed if we approve this are Matt Krieger, John Fraser, Eric Tate, Katie Sansfield, G.T. Carr, and Grace Holbrook. So could I have a motion to approve these 6 people to the Climate Action Commission?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Soleil, seconded by Mims.
Yeah.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 16, announcement of vacancies new. We have 1 vacancy to fill a 5-year term on the Board of Adjustment, 3 vacancies to fill 3-year terms upon appointment to the Climate Action Commission, 3 vacancies to fill a 3-year term on the Human Rights Commission, 2 vacancies to fill 4-year terms on the Parks and Recreation Commission, 2 vacancies to fill 3-year terms on the Public Art Advisory Committee, and 2 vacancies to fill 3-year terms on the Senior Center Commission. Applications for those positions must be received by 5 p.m. Tuesday, November the 12th of this year. Item 17, announcement of vacancies previous. We have 1 vacancy to fill an unexpired term upon appointment to the Human Rights Commission. Applications for that position must be received by 5 p.m. Tuesday, October the 29th of this year. We have 1 vacancy to fill a 5-year term on the Airport Zoning Board of Adjustment, and 1 vacancy to fill a 3-year term on the Historic Preservation Commission East College Street District, and 1 vacancy to fill an unexpired term effective upon appointment to the Historic Preservation Commission for the Woodlawn District. Vacancies for these positions will remain open until filled. Community comment? Austin, did you want to speak? I'm sorry, Oz?
I just want to say something about those before. I'm sorry, Austin, 1 second. I know that there is many positions now at the Human Rights Commission. Is there a way the people who apply to be contacted before and we reject them? Is there a way they can know about this?
If their application is within that 1 year from when they applied,
Yes.
they do get notification that there is an opening.
Okay.
And if they no longer want to be in the applicant pool, they can just reply to that email and we'll
Sure.
take them off the list.
Okay, thank you, yeah.
Go ahead, Austin.
Hello there again. Austin Wu, USG City Liaison. Let's see, the only thing I have of note is that the first round of midterms are in full swing, so good luck to everyone stuck with those, myself included. There is one event I'd like to bring up. The University of Iowa Student Gardeners will be hosting their fall open house this Saturday, 5 October from 1 to 3 p.m. It will be at the Student Garden on Hawkeye Park Road by the Tennis Recreation Complex. You can take the Hawkeye Underdorm bus there. According to the Facebook event, there will be yard games, scarecrow, mini pumpkin making, scavenger hunts, and snacks. It just looks really wholesome, and they're associated with Office of Sustainability, and of course, in terms of local food production and promoting sustainable land use. They're a great org. They've been pushing for a garden on the east side, close to campus by North Hall. So I'd recommend to check it out. Seemed pretty neat. That's all I have.
Great, thanks, Austin. Okay, so item 19, City Council information. Could we start with Susan and move to the right?
I have nothing.
Pauline?
I don't really have anything either, and I would like to actually defer. There are a couple of very exciting events coming up this weekend, and I'm going to defer to when it's Mazahir's turn for her to talk about them.
On the 19th of September, Bob Welsh was honored by the Johnson County Board of Supervisors as just being someone that has been a hero for various populations, including the elderly, disabilities community. And Bob Welsh is just a guy that has been in our community, really supporting a lot of people. It was a great event. I know that the mayor was there, as well as Mayor Pro Tem Pauline Teller. It was awesome to witness that day, honoring Bob. On the 24th, something that Bob orchestrated, I was able to go to and drive 7 individuals in a 15-passenger van, elderly individuals, down to the state capitol. And we were in the council chambers, and it was with OIL. OIL is Older Iowa's legislators, and they go in the chambers and they leave with some priorities that they submit for our legislators advocating for elderly people. That was really great to witness and be a part of. There are going to be some great things that have been suggested. I also last Thursday and Friday had the opportunity to go to Dubuque, Iowa, where it was the Iowa League of Cities, and the mayor mentioned a little bit earlier about that. That was a great experience. There were lots and lots of cities and city council, city mayors, city staff that was there. It was great to witness. Some of the things that we take for granted, some of these cities are actually struggling with. There was a seminar that I attended, and I thought, maybe I'll be able to learn something. But it was really about, I don't have the official title of the seminar, but it talked about how to start rental building codes. So there are some communities out there that don't have, they have some real struggles with how to start the rental agreements and the rental codes within their community, as well as some determining, what is considered a rental, if someone owns the property. So it was a great event. I loved every minute of it, met a lot of people, and hope to go back in the future.
That's a lot. Okay, I have only 2 really exciting events, as Pauline Taylor said. One of them is on the 5th, which is Saturday at 5:30. We have CWA have the annual fundraising event, the gala, at Unitarian University Society Church. And I guess this is on Oakdale Boulevard, off Oakdale Boulevard and Oakdale Road in Coralville. This event is really nice event. We have a lot of good activity and food and different kind of food from different countries, which is really great. The ticket is $50, and you are not throwing your money because beside you are helping low-wage worker, empowering the low-wage workers so they can identify issues in the community and organize around them and solve it. You're also going to eat very nice food there. And Sudanese food and Mexican, a lot good food there. And this is on Saturday. On Sunday, we have this really event called Connecting Iowa to Sudan. Since we have really growing population of Sudanese here in Iowa City, and also there is many things going on Sudan right now as a country, but there is exciting morning where for the first time in 65 years, now they're transferring a government from military to civilian. And we have a speaker who is coming all the way from Sudan, and he chose 3 states. One of them is Iowa. He chose to go to Washington, D.C., California, and Iowa, which is exciting. He will come to speak on that day. Would like to connect with the Sudanese community and with Iowan, tell them about what happened. This is really will be an awesome time. It's free for the public. We encourage everyone to come. We will have just like to engage like both community Iowan and immigrants. This is a way we can connect these people together and build one community. Usually this happens when you understand the culture for other people, which is going to be through art and music and dance. We have a lot of good, exciting things. Plus, you're going to learn more about Sudan. I encourage everyone to come to this event. It is at St. Patrick Church on the 6th of October, Sunday, which is at 6 o'clock, from 6 to 9. You can leave anytime, but come at 6. And that's all. And I encourage everyone in the room to come over. It's free and public event. Yeah.
I'm just going to reemphasize it's the Iowa City Book Festival from October 2nd through October 6th. So there's a lot of good events to check out. It's iowacity.org. And even though this is not our assigned boards and commission, I just want to indicate that our mobile home task force is continuing to meet. And we're going to meet on Monday, October 14th, to come up with a final set of recommendations relatively soon. So stay tuned.
I just have one previous event back in September on the 20th. The DVIP had their 40th anniversary in Coralville celebration, and Deb Talon gave the keynote, which is probably one of the more moving keystones I have ever heard. Of course, you know, the subject matter is a very emotional one, but she was just remarkable. And Linda McGuire gave kind of a wonderful, entertaining history of the organization as well. So it was a very impressive event for a very impressive organization within our community.
I already
You started this, right?
Yep.
All right, I'll just mention a couple things, and then I have a little surprise for people here, so hang loose. At the Iowa League of Cities meeting, one of the things I had a chance to do was attend a workshop titled Strategies for High Achieving Women in Local Government Leadership. And I found it really very useful and informative and inspiring. The room was packed, mostly with women. I think there were 4 or 5 men in the room. And the speaker provided all sorts of advice and engaged in discussion with people about how to be more effective, how to play the leadership role if you are what you are, a high achieving woman, but how to do that best. And it might be worthwhile asking her to come down here, but we have a lot of effective high achieving women here, so I don't know. But it was a really very good workshop. And I don't know. I'll mention one other thing. The Iowa, as I said in a proclamation I read earlier, the Iowa chapter of the American Planning Association is holding its annual conference here next week. So I think it starts Wednesday and runs through Thursday and maybe Friday. I'm a little confused about exactly when it starts, but later next week, and there are 30 sessions that will be part of that event. But for me personally, got to be personal sometimes, the big news for me was, ta-da, the birth of my second grandchild.
Congratulations.
Is Isabel Helena Throgmorton.
All right.
And she is now 7 days old. It's very exciting. And I want to make sure you folks have a chance to have a bit of chocolate.
Thank you.
I don't know what's in there, but
Surprise.
I imagine it's good.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you. I had nothing to do with it. How about you folks down here?
Oh, definitely chocolate.
Susan,
Oh,
it's doing
gosh,
good.
just a question of which one. This one looks good.
We could turn to
Thank you.
Jeff.
Can't top that, Mayor. I'll pass.
Each one, probably 50 cents.
So the white one.
Carl.
Okay.
Ashley,
I'll,
could you take this out there?
yeah.
Do that.
Yes.
Was that?
Or we could just.
I know.
Susan,
Yeah, at least
Susan, you
it's
did okay. Thank you.
At least it's not 11, right?
Take one for Susan Mims.
I told you.
So short.
One for Susan Mims.
In the spirit of full disclosure, I purchased this at the yogurt place on the Ped Mall at the intersection of Dubuque and College Street. Oh, I wanted this to go out to the audience.
That's for you, Susan.
Don't worry.
Are there enough left? Gotta have a few privileges, right?
It's a community endeavor.
I love it.
Ashley, do you have anything to say?
I can't top that. Congratulations.
Eleanor?
Congratulations, I'm jealous.
Thank you. Kelly?
It doesn't top that, but since I have a captive audience.
Announcement from Kelly, yes.
Well, I want to make sure that I'm still trying to pin down a date for the listening post. Does it
Oh, yeah.
still work?
Let me look at what you sent.
Okay.
I'll get back to you tomorrow.
It
Yep.
does take about 3 days to hear
Yep.
back from the district on the room, so
Yeah.
it kind of messes up
Yeah, I've been
dates.
in and out.
Okay. Okay, and Maz, you'll check, I sent an email about the listening post. If you
what?
could- About the listening post, if you could check
Yeah.
the dates and,
I send you the date that worked for
but I
me.
sent it again this week.
Should hand out chocolates at every meeting.
I will see it, but text work better for me.
Okay.
When you meet,
I'll
you
do
want,
that.
you want me you want me to respond like fast.
Okay.
I've
I
learned
have
that.
3 different
I have
emails.
learned that.
Okay, folks, I think we're done. Could I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So move.
Moved by Teague, seconded by
Salih.
Salih. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.